All right, well, we are going to get started by approving the agenda, and hopefully the Metropolitan Police will be here shortly after that. So the motion on the floor is for us to approve the agenda that was posted 7 days ago.
Madam Chair, I have an amendment. 4674 Reservoir will come off the agenda.
Let me second.
Oh,
Let me second your amendment.
Second, right, you open it up, yes.
Go ahead.
That is a friendly amendment. So we are removing 4674 Reservoir Road,
Okay, and adding,
4607 Green Place.
yes, thank you.
We will be doing that, and that will take place as the third item on the agenda.
Okay.
It is going to be after the lab school BBA application. We will also be adding 5113 Sherrier Place, and that will come number 4 on the agenda, right after Green Place. And we are adding 2 items. I'm taking this as a friendly amendment. Under Commissioner Business at the end of the meeting, we will be talking about additional funds for attorneys to address some illegal construction. And we will also be taking up a possible ANC YouTube channel. Do I have a second for that? Or it's a friendly amendment? Any conversation?
Sounds great.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. None opposed. The agenda is set. And I see our Metropolitan Police here for the first time in person for a long time. This meeting is hybrid, so it would be great if you could stand at the podium, because then we can get you in the picture. And up here is Officer Tony McElwee, who we all know very well, our traffic officer. Please.
Thank you, Commissioner Duncan. I'm Officer Anthony McElwee. Good evening, everyone. I'm your traffic officer, as well as your liaison officer for traffic reports and crime reports. I'm going to first start off with the traffic report, and Lieutenant Pongratz, who's also present, is going to come up and present the crime report. I'm happy to say we had no serious accidents in the last 30 days within PSA 205. And I'd like to say that's because of active enforcement out there for active enforcement. The areas that I did give special attention to, Foxhall and Reservoir Road is our #1 area of concerns. Up there as well as Ward Circle. Foxhall and Reservoir, vehicles are traveling south on Foxhall, and what they're doing is they're using the left lane, which is a left turn lane, to turn to go on the Reservoir. And around rush hour is the worst time for this, so they'll go straight across Reservoir. Not only is it dangerous, it presents a problem for traffic accidents, it also, it's also creating a lot of complaints from residents. So with that said, I did go out there, and so far this year, I wrote 24 notices of infraction for failure to obey that left turn only lane. We will continue to monitor that location. Foxhall and Reservoir Road, or Ward Circle. Everybody's familiar with Ward Circle, where Mass Avenue meets Nebraska, right there at American University. It has gotten better over the years, the way they reconfigured the traffic signals there, but we still have offenders out there. They're making lefts from the center lane. I go out there and usually, I'd say once out of every 3 to 4 cycles, I'll get one. So we are maintaining enforcement out there. 4100 Cathedral, Captain Savoy had some complaints about speeding. So I was assigned out there last week, and from Monday through Thursday, I stopped 21 vehicles. I didn't see speeding much of a problem. What I did see is right there at the intersection of New Mexico and Cathedral, there's a no turn on red at 3 of the turns there, the 3 of the intersections, and 16 of them for no turn on reds. And this is important because 3 years ago, we did have a woman pushing a child across the street and didn't get struck by a vehicle turning there. Sherrier, Potomac, Dorset, and Carolina Place, evening rush hour. Vehicles turning off of Galena and cutting through to avoid the intersection of Arizona and MacArthur. Everybody knows there's signs out there. You cannot go through that neighborhood from 4 to 6:30. So I was out there, wrote several tickets.
Thank you.
And finally, the crosswalk, two things about this location. 4800 MacArthur Boulevard, we have the CVS, and Lieutenant Congress he's gonna jump in on that in the crime report. To up our visibility out there, I'm gonna step up enforcement for LiDAR enforcement, which is speeding in the 4800 block of MacArthur. And that started effective today. It'll give heavy visibility at the same time of calm traffic. So with that said, I'm also going to work the Cross Lake, which is right across the street from the CVS. So you can expect to see us out there more. With that said, I'm open for complaints, concerns, any questions?
I'm going to open it up to the commissioners. Does any commissioner have a specific question?
If I could just say, thank you, having attended many of these meetings now for the last several months, you've hit now just in your report on all of the complaints that I've heard in the last 6 months, and so it's just really impressive that you're bringing these forward and continue to enforce them, and not just going from one to the next. You're keeping the priorities live, so thank you.
All right, thank you, and we'll continue to do the best we can.
We have a questioner online, and I know, we all know this is National Park Service, but do we know if any tickets have been issued for dogs off leash in Battery Temple Park?
No, we haven't. Not us. We haven't. I do spin through there, but as you said, that is on part.
Have you seen them out there? Do you know?
I see them coming in and out. Yeah,
Okay.
they do patrol back there. I see them coming off Chain Bridge Road.
Before we move on to the crime report, does anyone have any questions on traffic? Quentin Officer, Commissioner Quentin Cologne.
Not traffic. I can wait after the crime report if that's what we're supposed to do.
Okay, this is on crime.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
And it's
Good to
great to
see
be
you.
back in person.
Yes.
Welcome back.
For those of you who have not met our lieutenant, I would like to introduce Lieutenant Pongratz. He is the lieutenant for our PSA, and he is extremely accessible, and we appreciate you coming here, and I will hand it over to you.
Okay, great. Good evening, everybody. I'm Lieutenant John Pongratz, Second District PSA Manager for 205, which incorporates Vauxhall, Wesley Heights, the Palisades, and Spring Valley. So the crime report for the month of April, we had 10 total offenses, 5 thefts, and 5 theft from autos. Of those 5 thefts, 1 was at Walgreens and 3 were at CVS. And what they had in common is what we're kind of seeing across the city is we had about 4 to 6 individuals. They come into the store, they have baskets or bags they bring in with them, and they go to a certain aisle, usually the beauty product aisle or even the detergent aisle, and they take as much as they can as quickly as they can, and they're out in about a minute. Then they hop into a car and poof, they're gone. And so what we've been doing, we've met with CVS corporate security. She's actually been driving around with us and going to the CVS's usually when after it happens. We also have a detail that we're doing. I really can't discuss too much about it, but the CVS and the Walgreens are not our only retail stores in 205. We're in the entire district, so we're hitting different places. Like today, we had 3 arrests for shoplifting. Last week we had 2 more, and so it's a citywide problem, and we're doing the best we can to address it. We're also going to implement this program from downtown. It's called the QR code, and I recommended that CVS on MacArthur Boulevard, along with the Walgreens on New Mexico, get a QR code. We're going to place it in the back of the store. What officers will do is when they come into the store, they go to the back, use their phone, and they scan the QR code to show that we've been there. All right, so that would be kind of like an accountability thing. I've spoken with the corporate lawyer in the Walgreens, and I've recommended we do it, and they're kind of agreeing that we will, along with CVS. They want to do it as well. So we're just waiting for the approval from downtown. The Spring Valley CVS is actually on 202. Not 205, but I did some research. That store has had the same kind of like shoplifting incidents. They've had 5 of them in the last 28 days. And the CVS on MacArthur had 3 last month and then 3 in March. And the Walgreens has had 1 reported in the last 60 days. But just to give you guys an idea here, for thefts, for the year, we've only had 27 reported thefts in the entire PSA this year. Last year was 13. When we go over to Georgetown, they've had 105 so far this year. So we're looking pretty good. I know it's unnerving. We've had, the residents by the CVS when it occurs, see a lot of people running out with goods. We ask that you do not get involved, just call the police. You give a lookout in the car, because they did have a blue Hyundai. They ditched it, then it was a black Kia, which we found the other day. So I don't know what the next car is going to be. But the best thing you can do is call 911, tell them what you're observing, and give a description. And then a direction of traffic. That helps tremendously. Because then that's relayed to the officers that are responding over the radio. That if they're in that direction, they're going to be looking for that car. But with that being said, at the same time, we're not allowed to chase, not for shoplifting. Right? Any questions?
We do. I'm going to open it up to commissioners. Do any commissioners have any questions? Well, I'm gonna go ahead and ask one. Can you
Yes.
please, is Massachusetts Avenue the dividing line between the 202 and the 205?
Yes.
It is, okay.
Yes. So that CVS is right on the right side.
So you have a counter lieutenant over there?
Yeah,
that you-
yeah,
that-
Lieutenant Murphy, and he's had residents reach out to him about it. I went ahead and just looked at the last 28 days, just because I know it's been in the news, and they're using the term robberies, and they're not robberies. They're shoplifting, or you could even argue that.
Could you explain the difference between robbery and theft? Because there was a discussion on our listserv.
Right,
Just
so
briefly.
I'll do all 3. So shoplifting is when you're taking items that are for sale, merchandise for sale, typically which is like CVS or Walgreens, and then you walk out past registers without paying. And there's no threat of violence or threat of force or anything like that. Basically just walk in, grab whatever it is, and you walk out. That's shoplifting. Theft is like when you're taking it from a person, like I take your bike off your front porch, or ladies, you leave your purse on the countertop and you go over and then your purse is gone. That's that. Robbery is the theft, and then you have the threat of violence or force prior to the theft or during. So if they were walking into the CVS and they pull out guns, they're blazing guns, and give us, we're taking the money out of the register, that's a robbery of an establishment. Or a knife, or they grab the manager and they're assaulting him or her, and then they're taking whatever it is. And that happens, that's usually money in the register. What we're finding is this is just an organized retail theft ring. And they're hitting the CVS's, the Walgreens, they're also hitting stores downtown. So it's a retail theft operation. And the Target, I don't know if you guys have been to Target over at Tenleytown, but they've upgraded their security system where like you go past a certain point and the walls come down, the alarms go off, security's coming. So it's extremely advanced. And so what they're doing, and I think the chief talked about this at the Palisades meeting, is that now they're starting to hit the smaller stores. And it's easier. I watched the video, it takes like less than a minute and they get thousands of dollars worth of product.
Does that upgrade the shoplifting charge to
No.
that, the dollar amount?
No.
It does not.
It does not.
That's the way that the code is written as of
It
today.
does not. It's not. So, and we have to say shoplifting, we have to say that, we can't say robbery, because that becomes problematic later, because if we make arrests, we're not gonna charge them for robbery.
And then that can be used in a court.
Right, now, you can charge them with the theft scheme, because you can aggregate it, and if you can connect them to enough, then yeah, then it becomes a more serious charge.
So videos do help. in
Video
advertising.
does help, like I said, the lookouts help. The clothing descriptions, things like that, it does help because that helps connect cases, other cases together, because like I said, this just isn't 205.
Do you think it's one ring or just a few rings of people?
We think it's one with several people involved.
So if we can catch them in the act somewhere, that will help. a
And
lot.
that's actually what we're trying to do. Like, we are out there and we are in touch with CVS, we are in touch with Walgreens, and they're, like, I know at the CVS in MacArthur, there's been talk about how they're gonna take some of their products and put it behind a plexiglass. Now, if that happens, I don't know, but that's what they're talking about. At least for corporate.
I'm opening this up for further questions. Thank you. That was
You're welcome.
very informative.
Okay,
And it's good to see you.
yeah, you too.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Up next on the agenda was the budget presentation by Mr. Everett Lott.
And he's coming, but I can pitch it, the deputy director, and then when he joins, he can take over.
Hey, do you think he's on his?
He's actually on a call right now.
Oh,
We had
he
a
is.
15 call, so he's in the vicinity, but, wrapping up. the call.
I really appreciate you pinch hitting, but I think we might,
Okay, I think
Wait.
he has to leave on the other end, so.
Oh, he
we'll still
does?
be standing up at some of it, but if you wanna, you've got something for 5 or 10 minutes, and then he can come in and do the presentation, but
are the commissioners ready to do commissioner? Well, I'm not sure we can change the order of business, can we?
Do we need to make an amendment to the agenda?
Yeah, okay, please.
okay.
And you are
Oh, Sharon Kirschbaum.
Sharon Kershaw. Oh, yes. I
Deputy
know your
Director,
name.
yes, and I am actually a resident. I could walk here tonight, so.
Oh,
Did
great.
you walk on a sidewalk?
I walked on the sidewalk that is on the side that has it.
It was, I thought you looked very
That's her cause celeb.
Oh, on W Street. Was that you?
Well, I'm sure I supported it,
Yeah.
so.
Thank you for being here.
Any wild turkey spot sightings recently? I saw one in the W Street Park. And I was so excited, but I don't have not like confirmed this with anyone else. No,
No.
seen it.
In,
It was
near the river.
You saw it in the river. Okay, this was in W Street Park. Oh. Perfect timing. All right.
Just get started.
I had to be there.
We were talking about wild turkeys and I was gonna say I saw a bald eagle, so.
Oh, I forgot my trump.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think you're gonna kind of at least kick off on the budget piece and.
I was expecting like a full. auditorium full of folks.
You know, if you could see the number of people that are on our Zoom who are enjoying this from home. But we are delighted to see you, Director Lott. For those of you who have not met the director of DDOT, this is Mr. Everett Lott.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Happy to be here. I apologize for being a little late. I was actually out in the hallway just now talking to the chancellor, who I think is getting prepared to. But I was out in my car for the last 45 minutes on a call. And then I have another meeting in about 40 minutes, 30 minutes or so. So Sharon, Christian are all going to tag team. So I'm going to present on the budget. And then Sharon's going to answer all the tough questions after that. Do we have the presentation up? Will we be able to?
Oh, yes,
Slides for it?
I
Or-
have my laptop, we can do that,
Is that possible or?
You sent us to.
Yeah, let me do that, I apologize, I should have probably done that before.
So while Christian's getting that set up, I'll just talk a little bit about what we're doing in the budget right now. I think everybody knows that the mayor presented her budget probably about a month ago. What we're expecting is some pretty significant revenue shortfalls because of low occupancy with people returning back to work in some of the buildings in the downtown area. So what that really has forced us to do is really have to make some pretty significant cuts across the district agencies across the board. And unfortunately, VDOT was also one of the agencies that had to take some of those significant hits. We, as a district, $339 million revenue shortfall. So that's what we're ultimately trying to make up. So as we're going through this presentation, you'll see some areas that DC did, the Department of Transportation. Some of the things that we did to make the cuts to help offset some of that $339 million revenue shortfall. At the end of the day, what we're trying to do as an agency is still making sure that we're providing safe, reliable, affordable services equitably across all 8 wards and across all the ANCs and everything else. So that's what you'll hear in the presentation that I'm going to pull up, or that Christian's pulling up. And to talk about a few of the reductions. Right now, while if you wait on, I'll tell you about some of the revenue enhancements, or some of the enhancements just from transportation perspective. I think from this particular ANC and for this ward, you all would be very interested in. There's about, for transportation, about $23.5 million to continue the investment and bringing all the Ward 3 streets into a state of good repair. So $23.5 million is dedicated to Ward 3 for, again, making sure that all the streets are in a state of good repair. And what that means is this primarily our paving, for our paving dollars to make sure we're able to pave our roadways, repair sidewalks, and also repair any of the type of what I'm trying to say,
Alleys?
well, alleys as well, for again, making sure that those are all in a state of good repair. In addition, we have about $112 million that are specifically being used to rehabilitate and also to reconstruct and maintain. This is citywide alleys across the city. So that's $112 million that will be specifically dedicated for alleys. I know that was one of the big topic areas that I saw in the notes that I believe you all as ASC and in Ward 3 in terms of the alleys and making sure that we have those connection points and having those alleys being repaired and replaced. Also, we have about $100 million that will be for bringing specific for alleys, state of repair. Again, that's across all 8 wards as well. And that's for the maintenance of the alleys and also for construction of new alleys. And so you'll see, and we feel really confident between our sidewalks, our alleys, and our roadway paving that we have the majority of those in a state of good repair. And one of the conversations that the council actually is debating now is about how do we get to that last little piece that has not gotten into a state of repair done. Right now, a lot of resources that you'll find specifically as it pertains to paving is equally distributed across all 8 wards. Meaning that, if you have $24 million, it's been divided by all 8 wards evenly. But what we're finding and what we found out is that not all 8 wards roadways are in the same condition. So we've been making a push for some time now to, at this point now that we have majority of our roadways in state of repair, to let us use the money so we can prioritize where the needs are based on where the roadway work needs to be done. And so that's what you'll start seeing happening going forward. Do we have it up yet?
I sent it over.
Okay, all right.
Coming up now.
Perfect. Okay. Then we just have a couple other things. Oh, perfect. A couple of things, $3.7 million to complete the Arizona Avenue Northwest connection to the Capitol Crescent Trail. I know that's something that's very important to folks that live here in this ward. $9.5 million for the rehabilitation of the pedestrian bridge over Arizona Bridge in Arizona Avenue Northwest. And then the last thing we have here, this is not necessarily in this particular ward, but it is something that was noted as an area of concern. It's the $2.4 million for planning and also for the design of Military Road and Oregon Beach multimodal trails, and that's over in Rock Creek Park. So thank you for pulling this up. I'm gonna go quickly through the budget presentation and talk a little bit about, again, some of the highlights and tell you where we are and how we got there. And if we can go back, I think, one slide, that would be helpful. Yes, perfect. So again, my name is Everett Lodge. I'm the director for the District Department of Transportation. I'm joined here by with our deputy director, Sharon Kirschbaum, who actually is one of your neighbors, and also Christian Pinero, who is our Ward 3 community engagement officer. So thank you all for being here today. We're here to answer and address questions and to hopefully any concerns you may have, be able to help resolve those concerns or issues that you may have. So the first slide that you have up here is really is our foundation. We have 7 principles that really guide us in terms of the work that we do. Safety and equity are leading those efforts. This is part of our multimodal long-range transportation plan, a 25-year plan. And it's driven by, again, safety and equity in everything that we do. But also mobility, project delivery, management operations, enjoyable space and sustainability are all tenets of those of the multimodal transportation plan. But again, as we're talking about roadway projects, as we're talking about streetscapes, as we're talking about sidewalk repair, pavement markings, pavement repair, again, we're looking at it from a safety lens. We're also looking at it from an equity lens, making sure that the things that we're maybe doing over here in Ward 3 are the same types of things, same type of efforts that we're doing in other parts of the ward as well. Next slide. So as I referenced, as we were getting the slides up, our operating budget, we again had encountered as a district government encountered about $339 million revenue shortfall. And as a result of that, we had to make some pretty significant cuts in each of the different agencies. And so some of these cuts that are reflected here are some of the cuts that we as a Department of Transportation had to make. One of the ones that may be most familiar with many of you, specifically in this ward, is $6.9 million for the circulator bus. So what we have proposed is we have 6 routes currently, and we propose to eliminate 3 of those routes. One of those routes is the Whitley Park route, which is our second highest ridership route. I believe that's one that is closer to this particular area right now. The other one that we are actually keeping is the Georgetown Union Station route. And let me just tell you the 3 that we're planning to keep. It's Georgetown Union Station, the mall route, which is one that's primarily for a lot of the local tourists in the downtown mall area. And then the third one is Congress Heights Union Station route. And let me explain the rationale behind the 3 routes that we chose to keep. Georgetown Union Station, that is our most populated, has the most ridership. So that one we decided to keep because of that. The mall route, we actually get funding from the National Park Service. Because of that, and that part that we have, we want to make sure we kept that because we're actually getting monies for that. And then the third route, which is the Congress Heights Union Station route, we decided to keep that one because, again, we want in equity, make sure we had some services that are being provided east of the river. The 3 routes that we are proposing to eliminate are routes that also have other metro accessibility access points. So Metro bus, Metro rail may provide some type of services that helps to get folks from A to B in those 30 routes that we cut. And again, Whitley Park is one of the routes that we chose, proposed to cut. The Eastern Market is the second route. And what's the third route?
Getting cut.
Yes,
You mentioned Roslyn.
and the Roslyn route is the third one. So that's kind of the plan right now. Council has proposed something in terms of putting one of those routes back. And so that's part of the debate, the conversation that's been ongoing right now. Some of the other kind of big cuts that we had to look at were, again, some vacancy cuts. So the good thing about this budget, no personnel were actually eliminated. So the vacancies that we had in our budget that we identified, which totaled about $4 million, were vacant positions, but no actual personnel. And let me kind of flip over quickly to some of the enhancements. One of the enhancements that you'll find, I think this program is growing more and more each year, is our capital bike share. About a month and a half ago, we just introduced our electric bike 2.0. It's the gray bike. Goes a whole lot faster, a whole lot smoother, and I think it's about 60 miles worth of range before it has to be recharged. So we've added about $5.8 million to increase capital bike share. It is our most economical transportation option that we as a district agency offered right now. The other program that we is very popular, people are very familiar with, is our street read program. And so right now we have about $800,000 to allow us to operate one street read program. This past year, we did a street read program, open streets, in all 8 wards. This one is a street read program, but this one is supposed to be specific for open streets. So it allows us to do an open streets program, one in the upcoming year 24. Next slide. So in this particular slide right here, just shows a little bit about our capital budget. So we have two main sources of funding. We have our capital budget, which really funds all of our major projects. Our streetscapes that we talked about, our major construction, and then we have our operating dollars. Our capital projects, this is where you'll see over a 6-year period where we saw a pretty significant hit because of the budget situation I was explaining a little bit earlier. So you can see from FY24, a $388 million budget. You go down to FY29, it goes down to $226 million. So that's a pretty significant decrease in funding. So what that means essentially is that programs, services, construction projects that we have proposed or planned, either those will have to be pushed back, those have to be scaled back, or those will have to be essentially eliminated. So again, we're talking some pretty tough times right now based on, again, potential and proposed revenues that the OCFO has certified that we are not expected to receive. And so as a result, we had to again start making some pretty significant cuts in our budget. And is that the last slide? Okay, so that's kind of in a nutshell. What I can still say about this budget, we still have a lot of programs that are in the pipeline, a lot of projects that are in the pipeline. I referenced several of those as we were starting out the opening, specific projects that I believe are of interest to folks here in this ward and specifically in this ANC. And so those projects are funded for 24, like the Arizona Bridge, pedestrian bridge. And so we're really happy about that. Again, and we're always looking at it from the approach of safety and equity. There's a couple of projects that aren't funded right now. And I know like the trolley trestle is one that has been raised for quite some time. And we still don't really have the funding for that at this point in time. And then I believe there's one program or one project that it has been of interest, and it's been an ongoing conversation, discussion between WMATA, Georgetown University, and that has been one of our challenging aspects as well. So again, with the money, you will see that there has been some money proposed in the budget right now, and the FY24 budget, I think it's $500,000. But based on the estimates that we're seeing right now, that money still would not cover the cost knocked down. Is that the Trestle Bridge?
Yeah, it's just, and that was like a council change.
That was a council
They said
proposal.
500,000, yeah.
And right now, that bridge is not a district asset. That's actually a bridge that's owned by WMATA. So I believe WMATA has had plans to knock that down, but that's something that we're really kind of push and encourage them to do. But the money that they're putting in this budget is money that, again, at this point in time, would not cover the cost for that, if that money is in the budget. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. The budget is, the city council is reviewing the budget right now. They were engaged in a long 9-10-hour conversation starting today. I believe they go to their council of the whole, called the CAL, on May the 16th for the final vote. And so right now, we're really, one of the programs and projects that many of you all may have heard on the news is K Street Transitway. And so we really want to make sure that that project and that program is restored, because right now the council has taken $150 million out of that program, which essentially kills the project. What this project does, I'll share that with you and then I'll wrap up there. It's a 12-block project from 10th Street all the way to about 21st Street, K Street. What it allows us to do is to put a dedicated bus lane down the center aisle, so that those buses can run unobstructed. So those buses can improve their headways, and their estimates are showing about 30 to 40% increased capacity and increased timing. And also what it does is it allows us right now, if you go up and down K Street, I was there yesterday for a dentist appointment, you have the service lanes right now. And unfortunately, there was a car accident there today. A car ran on one of those service lanes and flipped over. Those service lanes have been very problematic for years now. They cause a lot of confusion, a lot of congestion. And right now, because the service lanes and the buses that are actually in the lanes of traffic with vehicular traffic, those buses are very inefficient. So what the project entails is us to essentially eliminate those service lanes, put a dedicated bus lane down the center lane, protected, having medians and bus shelters in the middle where people can go safely get to the bus, sit and wait for the bus, and have a very easy, safe, reliable bus route. One of the things we were proposing to do in our plans initially was also to put a dedicated bike lane on K Street. As we heard from many of the stakeholders on K Street, they're like, look, we need to have access to the curb. We have businesses, we have residents, we have restaurants on K Street, and like, we need to have access to the curb, and putting all this on K Street would not allow that. So we made some modifications to the proposal. The modification included taking the protected bike lane off of K Street. So that would allow us to have access to the curb space for those businesses that are along K Street, to pick up and drop off loading and unloading. And then on the next block over L Street, there's already a bicycle infrastructure on L that's protected. We would enhance that and make that, right now it's one way eastbound, we'd make that a two-way cycle track. We'd improve, do signal modification. We'd be working with WAB and other bicycle advocates to make sure that it meets the safety requirements and needs that they would make them feel comfortable as cyclists. So that's kind of what's at stake right now. And that's what's been proposed right now, is to eliminate the funding for that. So we're really been pushing stakeholders, council, residents, ANCs to really let your council know that this is something that is supported. It's something that's going to improve bus efficiency throughout all of DC, not just on K Street, because that K Street connection point is a connection to the network. So, so we're really hopeful that by May 16th, we'll have its full support and get that funding restored. We're ready really to start that project and put it out for a procurement probably this fall, and then hopefully we'll start construction next year. And that construction will be done in a three-phase approach. So none of K Street would be under construction all at one time. We do it in three segments. So from about 10th to 15th Street is where we start. We finish that, and then we move 16th to 18th Street, start, finish that, and then we complete the last segment. So at no point would the whole street be torn up at any point in time. But at the end of the day, what it's going to make is for a completely transformative K Street for a much improved, safer experience and pedestrian experience for everyone. So we really hope that we can get y'all support on that. Please reach out to your council member. Brooke Pinto is definitely an advocate. She's been fighting really hard for it. Really appreciate that. And there's a few other council members that have been doing the same. So thank you for the time. I really appreciate that. Sharon is available. Christian's available to answer additional questions if y'all have them. And look forward to coming back really soon.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I can see people at home, I me too. Do you have time for a few questions, or please, come on, Ms. Kirschbaum? I'm going to open this up to commissioners. Would anyone like to start with questions? Before I start peppering. with
Actually,
questions?
can I just add one other little piece of information? I know the director shared that this latest council markup has taken out funding from K Street. I know Commissioner Elkins is really concerned with our sidewalks. And I have to say, another thing that the council built into this latest markup was to cut 20 million from our paving budget. That's 12 million of sidewalk money, 8 million of paving. That's actually for this year. And I'll tell you, when you look at the map of where the sidewalk's not going to get paved, there's a vast majority is Ward 3 and Ward 4. We have made a big raise the flag that this is critical. It is 40% of what's left for this paving season is just going to get slashed. And we were blindsided by it. But I just wanted to make people aware.
If I can just, could you repeat those numbers again?
Sure. So the paving budget that we have for the balance of this fiscal year, $20 million was taken out of our budget by the council markup. So when the mayor presents her budget, the council marks it up. One of the things they did was out of our capital budget, took 20 million. It's going to go towards fare-free efforts, the fare-free bus. And so they have been sharing, well, there'll be some efficiencies. They don't really need the money. And I just wanted to make people clear that what that looks like. And I have a map of all of the unpaved sidewalks that we were going to use that money for the balance of this year. That we're going to have to cut it almost in half.
So they're trying to save their free
Yes, so
fare.
they're cannibalizing K Street, they're cannibalizing 20 million of our paving budget. There's a long list of other things that they're cannibalizing. And so I just wanted to raise that flag because I know that the director said we have money in our budget for keeping our roads and sidewalks in a state of good repair. That will not be the case if this market happens. So just wanted to.
I'm just going to continue on with the sidewalk.
Okay.
questions. Is there any money for brand new sidewalks?
So we do have a budget for new sidewalks, and
And we have, as you know, we have a lot of streets that have no
Yes,
sidewalks.
yes, and I have to tell you, this is an issue that is very dear to.
We need to talk.
Okay, we have recently finished an assessment where we counted all 700 segments of streets in the district that don't have sidewalk on both ends. There's a law, as you know, that there should be a sidewalk on at least one side. We are getting a contract set up and about to hire a project manager. Because right now, we're sort of begging, borrowing, and stealing from our resources that we have to try to do this, and we just need to have more dedicated attention. It's both the contract, the people to do it, and the money. The resources right now are not an issue for this program, and I am hopeful we won't cannibalize that to help with the paving budget. So we probably have about 6 million set aside. How much that will get us, this is going to be a multi-year effort to try to knock away all the segments, but we're prioritizing those segments that don't have sidewalk on either side. And as you know, there are very many in this area. So stay tuned. I could really use your help though. When we would like to map out a plan. We're going to have some really hard ones, some easy ones, some big ones. But we do want to try to give as much advance notice to communities as possible. We know in the past, it's always about sort of notifying folks and socializing this early, because some people have things that are in the right of way that they consider their front yard that might need to be moved. And it's been something that has derailed this effort in the past. And I do not want it to derail, and I could really use your partnership. And when we do start forming these plans, would love to work with you guys, show you what those are, and strategize with you on how we message those, because we know it could be a fight. And I don't want to let people's concern for their rose bushes stop us.
I would just like to say, if you think Chuck Elkins loves sidewalks, I may love them.
Okay, you will be my friend too then.
May I add something?
Yes, please.
I don't want to speak for other fellow commissioners. You'll find strong support from many of us in accomplishing that goal.
Good.
We really
Good.
want to back and support.
Okay, you're writing this down? Because I think in the past, we have sort of gone as a, let's try to discuss and negotiate, and that hasn't worked. And yet I do think we need to give people lots of notice. So I'd love to talk to you about sort of how we want to roll this out and get your feedback.
Go ahead, Commissioner Horn, you have the floor.
When the mention of the path over the Arizona Avenue, the Arizona Bridge, which is funded, does that funding include some part of the path along the trolley trail?
So the budget right now is only for the pedestrian bridge. It doesn't.
But what about the Americans with Disabilities Act? Doesn't that require you?
Oh, I'm sorry, are you talking about the ramps? To get to that?
So, well, I think we were informed today that the Arizona pedestrian bridge
Yeah.
includes what's on there. It's a whole project.
Okay, that's my
We were-
question.
Yeah, could you?
Okay. I'm sorry, but it's not, I thought you were asking about whether we were gonna be paving the trolley trail itself.
So, in this, for the people at home, the trolley trail is well known here because it goes all the way down to the Boundary Branch Bridge. But on this side of the neighborhood, we have the Arizona Pedestrian Bridge,
Right.
which has always been funded and talked about differently. And because the trolley trail starts at Galena, sometimes the two things get confused.
Okay,
So when DDOT is going to improve the Arizona Bridge, could you read what we were told by the project
Sure.
manager?
actually, Christian, did you pull this up?
I did, yeah, so
Okay.
our project team did determine that it does include the connecting path from Galena to Nebraska. I'm more than happy to kind of follow more specifics about that. It does not include the other ramp on the other side. I know there was 2 ramps. One portion is ADA will be enhanced. The other portion is restricted due to boundaries with MPS and geometric areas, but it does include that stretch in the scope of work that our team has.
And do you have any idea on the timing of when that design phase may start?
Sorry, off the top of my head, I don't recall the.
Do you think it's sometime this year or do you think early next year?
It's So I think it's what 9.5 was granted.
9.5.
That is for this year. We currently do not have, from what I recall, budget moving forward from 2029.
Okay, so
That
this
should
is it.
It's all consolidated to FY 24. That's correct.
Okay. 23 or
It's in the
24?
24 budget.
2020.
In the 2024 budget?
Yes.
Okay, so this is all consolidated into
Imminent.
Yes.
2024, Galena to Nebraska, plus a redo of the bridge, but a ramp only on one side.
Correct.
Okay,
And I do know there was some misconception about being 11 million. It is 9.5. Well, I also want to make that clear.
I think that I was going off memory and just adding dollars.
Right, that's what I'm,
Yeah.
no, that's
Okay.
terrific. The other question is, the schools and intersections covered by DDOT school crossing guards says that it includes, MacArthur and Dana and MacArthur and Arizona. But I haven't seen crossing guards there several times. Do you know, are they being cut, or is it part of hire them or keep them, or what's the deal?
So we have, we do not have enough safety techs or school crossing guards to fill all the posts. We do try to make sure that every school has at least one. We have a very big challenge with absenteeism. We have been redeploying our traffic control officers to help cover some of those gaps. But unfortunately, a lot of it is just, we find out at 7:45 a.m. that the person's not there, and we just can't get people deployed fast enough. We are looking to completely redo our traffic control officer schedules to help us have more available staff to help cover. But we know it's an issue. We also have a bunch of new traffic control officers coming on board. We have a cohort that's in training. But it's absenteeism is always a problem, and I just think that the actual counts of staff are not where we need to be. And unfortunately, with this current budget, we have not gotten any additional staff for 24. In fact, we had to sweep all of our vacancies to hit a target. So that's going to be, I'm hoping that some of the traffic control officers can fill the gaps, but it will take some time for us to get to 100% coverage. So, and I don't know if those intersections, if those are on there, you sometimes see a traffic control officer and sometimes not.
Most of the time, but then when they're not there,
It's
they're not
apparent,
there.
right?
The roads are, it's busy.
I know, yeah, it's not a good situation. I'm hoping some of the schedule changing and this new cohort will help.
Do any other commissioners at home have any questions or here? Because I'm gonna move to the chat. All right, I'm gonna run down these pretty quickly. The K Street redesign, does DDOT ever do bike lanes and bus lanes as one, like a co-bike bus?
We have done that with a protected bike lane. We don't, it's not a
Okay,
protected bike
it's a
lane.
bus,
It's just, it's got the pavement markings.
Okay.
It's dedicated.
With the new infrastructure bill, how can DC like tap into that money for some of their infrastructure projects, since we seem to be hit? And there seems to be like trillions of dollars.
Yeah, and so I think it's important on the bill money to just kind of clarify what the numbers actually look like. So right now, all of the capital money and funding we would get from federal highway, which were formula funds that we get every year, they kind of repackaged it in the bill, but the actual amount of new dollars is actually not that much. So there's a lot of discretionary grants that people can apply for, and we've been applying for them. We've had some success, but the amount of money that DDOT gets, I think there was a assumption that there would be this trillions of new dollars, and really it was, it's not that big a bump. And a lot of the formula money that went up, which is lovely, is already earmarked for bridge rehab and bridge restoration. And we already had a list of repairs that were needed. So it doesn't feel like we've got all these new options. It's like, okay, now we take.
Now
rid
you
of
can
that
do the
next
things that were on your list.
As the costs have been going up, we can actually afford to do them. So it's been a bit of a misnomer. And I think there are a lot of wish lists that like, this money won't really get us to do, but there's a lot of new money for EV charging and charging stations and a lot of discretionary grants that will make a difference, but it's speculative still in terms of whether we're going to get that money.
Oh, the bus. We know that WMATA runs some bus and DDOT runs the circulator. Does DDOT control the routes that are WMATA run, like the D6?
So we have really no say. Our deputy mayor sits on the WMATA board. We do partner with them when we can and go hand in hand and ask them to make adjustments. But in
The
terms of
circulator
route
is
changes,
the one that.
circulator's us.
Okay,
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Sure.
And are you gonna stick around, because we are talking about one issue that has to do with building in the public space,
Okay,
if you have time.
sure. Thanks, Grant.
Okay, great.
Okay, thank you.
Up next is Chancellor Farabee. Thank you very much, DCPS. We are doing hybrid and everybody, we're packed online, I can say that.
Is this the location that's?
Yeah, please.
All right.
Everyone at home, this is the Chancellor of DC Public Schools, Louis Farabee, and I will let you take it away.
All right, thank you. So there are three areas that I will cover this evening. One is, I think it's just important to talk about where we are from a process perspective. Director Lott did that as well. Then I'll show a little bit about where we are citywide, the city budget, specifically some investments here in Ward 3. Then finally close with where we are with the DCPS budget. I think there's some questions about DCPS that I have an opportunity to respond to as well. So from a process perspective, I think it's important again to double click on Director Lott's point is that the mayor budget pretty much is penciled down. So what we've submitted to the mayor has now been submitted to the council and the mayor's proposed budget. And so if there are things in the mayor's proposed budget that you're really excited about, my encouragement to you is let's make it known, advocate. If there are concerns that you have, I also think now's the time to share those concerns with council members, because as Director Lott noted, a lot of conversations will occur between now on May 16th with the cow that he mentioned, but there's less movement, less changes as we get towards the end of the month of May, and then the final decisions are made about the council budget. As you may know, this is a tighter budget season for the district, as the forecast for revenues are not what we've had in the past. One of the major drivers, for example, is commercial real estate. But the mayor remains committed, as we do as well, to the city's comeback. And there's continued emphasis on issues such as housing, public safety that continue to remain as priorities for us. And so digging deeper a little bit into just Ward 3, I want to highlight some of those investments. So there's $2.6 million to renovate the senior housing at Regency House as a part of our housing economic opportunity strategy for education and communities. This is my favorite part of the list. We talk about schools for a bit. There's $11 million in modernization for Deal Middle School, and you know it's our largest middle school in the city. We have $5.5 million for design of Foxhall Elementary School, and I think that's been a topic of interest. It's important to note that that school date has been pushed back to 2029. We also have modernization for MacArthur Boulevard High School. It's important to note that MacArthur Boulevard renovation and modernization will take place in 2 phases. So we're currently in phase 1, which will be complete by the start of the school year in August of 2023. That's primarily, common space, cafeteria space, and then for the second phase of modernization, we'll have more modifications to the classroom space, expanding some of the classrooms, and then also doing some other common space and branding and the like that needs to take place in the building. There's also $10 million in the budget for renovation at Stoddard Elementary. That is primarily to take some of the temporary space and convert that to permanent space in the building. There's $24 million in the budget for the Chevy Chase Library. There's $11 million for renovation for the Chevy Chase Community Center. There's $71 million for the relocation of the DC Archives to the new site in Ward 3. $72 million of renovation for UBC's campus at Van Ness. And then $750,000 to renovate the splash pads at the Palisades Community Center.
Under construction.
Yep, and so from transportation, you heard a lot from Director Lott. I won't hit a lot of those. I think a big investment is the historic investment bringing Ward 3 streets into the state of good repair. You heard a lot about that, and that's $23.5 million. One element of transportation, I think we go back to, you mentioned the D6, is as we are preparing for opening of MacArthur Boulevard High School, we do have additional routes that will be added. And then as the school population grows, we'll continue to ensure that there's appropriate transportation. Omada has been supportive, but of course, they want to ensure that the demand for ridership is there before they extend beyond what's currently being planned for the opening of the 23-24 school year. From the DCPS specific budget perspective, while the budget has been much tighter than in the past, there continues to be historic investments in schools. And in fact, DC Public Schools will realize a 5% increase in the budget, which is a result of an increase in the uniform per student funding formula that funds both DCPS and public charter schools. In addition to that, there are additional dollars that the mayor has layered on in what we call recovery dollars. These are dollars intended to offset some of the resources associated with the one-time federal recovery dollars that DCPS has received. And so, for example, to go a little bit deeper on that, we were able to get a lot of federal dollars and infuse those dollars into schools as part of our recovery effort. We knew that there were one-time funding, so we wanted to create a path to ramp down. So even though schools have received over the last 2 years recovery dollars to ensure that we're stable, the mayor's recovery dollars allows us to fund our schools at a minimum of 95% of what they got the year before, inclusive of all the one-time funding that schools have received over the past 2 years. And that's important to know because there's 3 reasons why a school could potentially see a change in the budget. And the change in one-time funding is a significant factor, especially if you look at the schools in Ward 3. If they have less dollars than what they had the year before, and even if they're changing enrollment, a lot of that is schools are receiving 100% of what they got the year before with recovery dollars. They're now receiving 95%. And then we'll continue to phase those dollars down as next year, the last year, we'll have access to those recovery dollars. I just think it's important to drill a little bit down in the context. But the 3, again, reasons that school budgets change is enrollment, programmatic changes. So for example, there may be a special education classroom offered in a year for those students at elementary school, but they now transition to the middle school. Those resources, the dollars, the personnel follow those students as they go to the campus. And then the final reason is, again, if there's a shift in the one-time funding that schools had access to, so they may have purchased personnel or other resources that they're experiencing change. I hit the redesign of MacArthur a bit, and I just want to note that, again, phase 1 and phase 2. Phase 1 is underway, and phase 2 will be complete by 2026. And we believe that's appropriate timeline because the school will be populated by 9th grade first. Primarily, we'll have a few 10th graders, and then each grade level will grow year over year. And again, the intent there is to deal with some of the overcrowding that we've seen at Jackson B. The other area that I want to highlight quickly, again, with Fox Hall is initially Fox Hall was scheduled to open in the 25-26 school year. And we're pushing that to 2029. There's 2 reasons. One, we have a much tighter capital budget. We still have $2.7 billion in our 5-year capital plan, but we had to be a little more surgical and strategic on how we allocate those resources. And then the second reason is the enrollment numbers that we were anticipating at the time when we were planning for Fox Hall had not materialized and they're realized in the same way during the pandemic. So I think it's important for us to continue to monitor enrollment. And I also know that there's been some interest in the city's boundary study as well. But the boundary study, that will be complete before we get into this new design phase for Fox Hall Elementary School. So I'll stop there and give ample time for questions, but those are just some of the highlights of Ward 3 investments and then school budgets as well.
That was excellent. I am certain that we have questions for you. So I'm going to open up the floor to commissioners. So Commissioner Joseph?
If I may,
Yes.
just for every, thank you for being here. My name is Jeremy Joseph.
Yeah.
My kids go to Kean Hardy for PCPS.
Thank you for choosing me to be
Through and through. Yeah. Thank you. And we want to choose PCPS. we're excited to do everything we can as a community to make the schools great. So we're fighting with you and working very closely. Many of us are working very closely with your staff at many levels to have the schools be the best they can. Yeah, if I could ask you 2 questions about MacArthur High School. One is, and then one question or 2 questions about Key School, please. MacArthur High School, my daughter may go there in a year. She's very excited about it. Parents are clamoring for tours. There was a tour scheduled and the tours have been delayed. We know construction's ongoing. I would like to just ask that tours be prioritized. It's a key way to bring families in, let them see the building. Because when they can see it, they can see that it's real and they'll make a big push to help the school be successful.
Yeah, we've heard that, we've had some conversations with the construction team, Principal McCray. We've asked for, some rendering and, Principal McCray is also, starting to work around potential some video tours of where we can capture some of the space. But we typically, when we're under major construction, try to limit, individuals in the building, obviously for safety reasons, and also to continue to work. So we'll continue to explore alternatives of what we can do to get people comfortable, but also ensure that we stay on track to deliver the building for the start of the school year.
Yeah, that's obviously the most important thing. The MacArthur High School bus and bus route, just as a fact for you to take back to Ramada, none of the kids, the data that Ramada has on the bus ridership isn't right because none of the kids swipe. So they don't have any good sense of how many kids actually ride the bus. Every day leaving party, 25 kids on the bus, not one kid swipes. So Ramada's data is suspect, so you can use that to tell them like, hey, the data is, don't let them throw the data card in front of you. Can you give us more details on truly how the kids are going to get to school now and in the future? This is a key issue for the success of the school. Most of the city, most of the catchment area, as you know, is not accessible by the D6 or by the 33.
Yes, so, right now, the commitment is to create routes as needed for families. I think we've had a lot of success with similar routing strategies, for example, at Darlington, Pioneer Middle School. And so, if there needs to be dedicated routes, they're certainly open to supporting that. We continue to work with them on what it looks like. I think one important factor in driving that is enrollment and where students live. And so one data point that we do control is who's going to be there in the fall. And so we're reminding families to enroll as early as possible so we can get a better picture of what the student population will be in terms of where people live and where we can ensure that they're transportation.
Thank you. I have one more question, if I may.
Yes, please.
Thank you. Yeah, it's just, I heard what you said on the buses. It is a condition precedent to kids going to the school that they can get there. And so waiting for the enrollment piece is sort of the horse for the cart to some extent. And so, if you build it, they will come. If you offer the bus, the parents will see that they can get their kids there. If you don't offer the bus proactively, the parents, there's no way for the kids to get to school. So I just urge you to put the.
What would be helpful is like where the potential stop location might be.
We have all of that. We've done that. We've provided all that information. What's the best way to provide that information to you in particular?
Sorry, we usually kick someone off.
Oh.
Sorry, I didn't. mean to-
Yes, so
Well,
I,
then Sharona has something in the back.
So actually tomorrow, there's a meeting with WMATA. We have a quarterly meeting where we meet with them along with other government agencies, as well as the charter school board. So the D6 has been a topic of discussion for the last several meetings. I will bring it up again. Something that I think is sort of causing a little bit of the sort of delay in some of this is WMATA at some point will be going through a bit of like a bus redesign situation where they are looking at their buses, looking at routes, things like that, looking at where to add more routes and things like that. So in terms of, like Chancellor Fairby mentioned, there will be more D6 opportunities in the morning and in the afternoon. we know students need to get to school, so that is like one piece. But then longer term, that we are looking at other opportunities to, potentially add lines to get kids from one side of the city to the other, like that middle part, like that, like the Glover Park area. So all of that information you shared with me, Jeremy, I've also shared with Wamata. So, and as well as, some other Ward 3, representatives, you know, who live in the community. So we are listening and working closely with Wamata. It's not happening as fast as, you know, we would like, but it's coming.
So, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so Mr. Kravitz is in the audience, we put together multi-page plans to suggest how buses could be designed to support MacArthur High School. And our goal is to make sure that high school is successful. We're trying to work arm in arm with these kids. And as Toronto said, they have that. I think the key is just to push Wamata to actually make it happen before better bus and everything like that. If I may ask one more question?
Yes.
Thank you. The key school has had trailers for 10, 12 years now. So they call them portables. The question there is, with Foxhall pushed out 3 or 4 to 5 years now, is there a long-term capital improvement plan there to make those permanent and safe buildings for the key community?
There isn't one currently funded in the budget. I think if we have a change of plan and we decide, you know, in the next year or so that there isn't enough information to continue to have Foxhall, I think there certainly would need to be some efforts around how we might, you know, increase capacity and update the facilities at Key and Stoddard in different ways than we currently have. But I think a lot remains to be seen in terms of, you know, the future of Foxhall.
That's fair. Thank you.
I'm gonna turn now to Commissioner Simkowitz, and he's online, but we should be able to hear him. Commissioner Simkowitz, would you like to unmute?
Yep. Can you hear me?
Perfect.
Thank you. A few years ago, the District of Columbia government extended the lease of the former Hardy School for another 15 years. Would the DC government have done this if DCPS needed the building?
Yeah, that was a mayoral decision. DCPS was not involved in negotiation of that lease. So unfortunately, there's not much I can, you know, comment on in terms of decision-making process. But certainly believe that we have the appropriate space to serve our students and families in our current structure.
If the lease had not been extended, would DCPS have used this space for a new school?
It was not in our plans to use that space.
Why, if it's not in the plans to use that space, would you build another school on Hardy Park right next door? Doesn't seem to make sense to me.
Yeah, I think the plans for Foxhall came after the discussion of the lease.
Did DCPS ever produce any maps or diagrams to show where the proposed school on Hardy Park would be located with respect to the park, like on the soccer field or the basketball courts?
Are you referring to the Foxhall School?
Yes.
Yeah, there are some plans of where the school would sit on that particular land that we would use.
Can you share them with us, please? And not today
No.
necessarily, but.
Yeah, I'll have our team follow up with you.
And I've got 2 final questions there. It should be easy. The former Whittle School building, we passed a resolution that was supported, I think, by every other ANC in Ward 3. And it's, of course, the Whittle School is in Ward 3. That's in move-in condition. I had a client that's kid went there. Why hasn't that been utilized by the DC government to move kids in there?
Well, as I said earlier, the capital budget is much tighter than it's been in the past, but right now it's also been cost prohibitive. The last time I checked, the numbers on that building, asking price was around $100 million, which is certainly cost prohibitive for DCPS.
Well, couldn't we rent that building if we don't have the money to buy it? Why hasn't that been done?
Yeah, we typically don't rent space for schools because we need to ensure that we have as much permanent space as possible.
The final question I have is on the MacArthur School. We passed a resolution to honor Georgetown basketball coach John Thompson Jr. to be, the school named after him. He is our neighbor. He was our neighbor at the university, which is right behind my house. And the university supported it. We supported it. And it was sort of blown off by the working group. Do you know if that's still in the plans?
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. I think there are many people in the community would support that naming. However, the DC Council has authority over school naming. And my last conversation with the council is that there's no intention right now to address the naming of MacArthur. And so our plan is to go into the current school year with the current naming that we've been utilized, but at some point I anticipate the council will take up action on naming, similar to what we've done with Jackson.
Do you have a preference between General MacArthur, who's not well liked by a lot of people in history, or Coach Thompson, who I'm sure as a DC resident, you probably love like the rest of us?
Yeah, I love Georgetown basketball. Again, I think it's a great idea, but I don't have a preference that I had to share at this moment about the name. But what is important though, I do think the students have been actively engaged in mascot, and we're going to build upon that, and then hopefully we'll get a name that the community is comfortable with as soon as possible.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you have a question, Commissioner?
Chancellor, on the MacArthur High School, can you remind us how many students are slated to be there next year for grades 9 and 10?
Yes, so maximum capacity for next year will be around 200.
Total or per grade?
Total. And again, the majority of those students would be ninth graders, but we have had pretty strong interest from our 10th graders. Again, that would be students that are currently at Jackson Reed in ninth grade that are looking for a more intimate, smaller learning environment. But again, we're still in the enrollment phases, and so good news, there's been lots of interest, but we also need families to execute on the enrollment process.
Yeah, indeed. So I saw in the DC lottery results that just about 100 students were selected for MacArthur. Can we then extrapolate that up? The other 100 students are in boundary by right to that school. I know this year they have a choice. They can go to Jackson Reed or they can go to MacArthur. But...
Right. So any boundary students would be students that are going from Hardy to MacArthur, and then students that are currently at Deal would also have rights as well. But it's important to note that at some point we do phase out the grandfathering, because students right now have a choice to either Jackson Reed or MacArthur. But once we get into full swing of operations, students from Hardy would go to MacArthur. So there's duality right now in a boundary assignment, if that makes sense.
I think it does. So over time, there'll be fewer out of boundary slots available because the slot can be taken up by the in boundary students who currently have a choice, but won't have a choice going forward.
That's possible, yes. So if more families choose to go to Jackson Reed, that would be boundary for MacArthur. That is possible. We're careful though, however, that we don't populate the entire school population or the majority of the student population solely from out of boundary seats. So it's important, I think, to have a balance. And I know Principal McCray has been working aggressively to ensure that that occurs.
It sounds like it was a pretty popular choice among the Hardy 8th graders.
Yeah,
So.
I think it is, it's unknown, right? So there'll be competition from, families who know Jackson Reed and not quite sure yet what MacArthur will be. And so I think that will be the challenge initially. But I think from what I hear, a lot of parents are thrilled about a smaller learning environment for a high school experience and instructional program that Principal Craig put forward.
Do any other commissioners have questions? There are some questions in the chat, and I think some people here have some questions I'm gonna take one from the chat and then I'm gonna hand it over to Mr. Kravitz, who's in the audience. So there are some questions about the lottery system. So the Hardy students are automatic. Do the Deal students who want to go to MacArthur, do they have to go through the lottery or can they just enroll?
So they can enroll, so student,
They need to go through the lottery.
are you doing that?
Yeah, they have a preference. So Oyster and Deal students have a preference, which means they'll jump the line compared to anyone that's not in Boundary and not at one of those two schools.
That's what I thought, because I had heard that a lot of the
Thank
students
you.
on the lottery were actually coming from Deal, which helps Wilson. I mean, that's, or Jackson Reed, sorry. I mean, that is the goal of Whitney High School
That is the goal. yes.
is to release pressure on that.
Overcrowded, yeah.
I'm gonna hand this over to Mr. Kravitz.
Thank you, from Church, Irving. I have one quick suggestion and a question that's masquerading as, or masquerading as a question. You talked about the challenge of parents envisioning their students going to MacArthur High School. I think one of the challenges of that is that this is being billed as a small cap plans. There is no blueprints, there's no design. And yet the construction is described as quite major enough to keep parents out. So it seems like from just a good sound fiscal point of view, that the city would be well served by spending a couple tens of thousands or even $100,000 on blueprints that envision phase 2 already also. So parents can see kind of concrete what's envisioned for the school. That's just a suggestion. I know this is a small cap. It doesn't actually need blueprints. And the blueprints only have to happen in phase 2. But we can already see we're really blending between small cap and major project already. So my question is about budgeting, and a lot of talk about budgets focuses on the headline number, the total sum of funds. And for those that kind of don't feel this stuff often, the total sum of funds is what the city allocates to the school to spend on all the things that are at the school. With that money comes a list of required positions that DCPS says you need to have. SPED teachers, ELL, custodians, things like that. From year to year, we may see that the budget stays the same, but the number of required positions goes up. So Hardy from 2 years ago to today has added 2 more SPED teachers, 4 more SPED aides, 1 more ELL teacher. And that eats into that total sum of funds that's shared, and the discretionary funds, which is where all the gen ed teachers and all the related arts teachers come from what's left over. So one thing I wonder if your team has thought about changing the way you present these numbers to present the discretionary funds left over after all the DCPS mandated uses of the total funds have been netted out. So that way audience participants, who are observers, can more accurately see what's actually available for the school to be using to fund gen ed, to fund related arts and things like that, and to fund assistant principals.
Yeah, so go back to your first comment. I do think you're right. There's a need. I mentioned that earlier, some visuals. Like I think there's some more work that we can do to create the vision for families to see ultimately what the campus will look like, look and feel. So great point there. I think in terms of the budgeting side of it, like there's very few positions that schools are required to have. But what I think you're getting at is there are students in the building that may have required services that are associated with staff and people. And so we do try to differentiate within the school budget those dedicated dollars and resources, for example, for students receiving special education services or language services. And so, for example, with students receiving special education services, their individual education plan dictate the personnel and the resources associated and refunding accordingly. And so that does increase sometimes or decrease the school budget, but what remains consistent is the dollars that the schools receive for their general education population. And all of that is funded through our formula. And so there's a dollar amount that is assigned to every student on a per student basis. And then there are additional weighted dollars based on characteristics of the student population and need. But all of the dollars that are consistent with the general population, they don't change based on those special populations that I mentioned earlier. Does that help? Because if you have more students in your building that require those services, your dollars are going to increase and your FTEs will probably increase as well, but it's associated with those particular students.
Yeah, I was referring specifically to the L1 and L2 positions that are limited flexibility at best. And due to some, discontinuities with how a certain number of students, you achieve 2 assistant principals or 3 assistant principals. There's a lot of wonkiness in that, and I would just say that what you described sounds like the ideal. It sounds like something that I would really like. When I dig through all the DCPS budgets, specifically in the old formula, but even in the new formula, it never seems to play out that way. So we can discuss another time.
Yeah, I think what makes it get a little murky sometimes is that there's a lot of autonomy that schools have to move resources around. And something is sometimes hard to follow how those streams are supporting students, but you're right. The language acquisition assessments determine the types of supports that go with the students who are language learners.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions?
I plan to work it all.
I think that is all we have time for. Chancellor Fairley,
Thank you.
thank you. It was an honor to have you come and speak to us.
I appreciate your support and advocacy, and we'll continue to ensure that there are clear views into transportation for Ricardo. Thank you.
Thanks for
Thank you. Thank you. I'm sure there's a lot more about it too. All right, we are moving right along. We are going to local institutions. Can we call up Kevin Days with GW? He is online and he said that he has a very quick update. And I also so Corey Peterson, everyone online is welcome to be very brief if you'd like.
Good evening, commissioners. Welcome to GW. I'll try to keep my announcements to be very brief. I have 3 announcements that I want to make. One is I want to just touch base with the commissioners in the community around a very important public safety announcement the university made regarding arming some of its GW police officers. So we rolled out this announcement a few weeks ago. The university is moving forward with implementing this plan, and there will be a way for individuals to provide feedback to the university. And after I'm done with my short announcements, I'll drop all of this information in the chat for those at home, and I'll have my email address, which I'll just tell people, which is kdays@gwu.edu, and you can write me to find out how you can provide feedback. The second announcement I'd like to make is that the university is holding its Mount Vernon quarterly community meeting. That meeting will be taking place on May 25th. We really want to invite you to come to that meeting. That's another opportunity to learn about this important public safety announcement and to provide additional feedback to the university leadership as it develops its implementation plans. My final announcement is that the university semester is winding down. And over the next few weeks, you may see more traffic around the Mount Vernon campus as students and their families come and unload them and pack them up, mostly or hopefully having a good first year at GW. So those are my announcements. Happy to take any questions if there are any. Otherwise, I'll return the balance of my time back to the meeting.
Madam Chair, I have a quick question. Commissioner Noah? Mr. Days, I know that Georgetown University has moved out trash pickup service for its students and extends that service to local residents around the campus. I'm curious if GW has something similar that you might want to share with our constituents here.
We do. We are working with our colleagues down, or I should say our community down in the Foggy Bottom community to support move out. We have a far more off-campus students in those communities. Move out at Mount Vernon campus occurs mostly on our campus, and the university does provide facilities to make sure that trash is taken away, that recyclables are done. We do recycling bins, so folks who want to get rid of electronics or items that they don't want to trash but want to make sure get used. All those places are occurring on campus. But because of the nature of the Mount Vernon move out, we generally have not extended that to the larger community.
Okay, if I could just make a suggestion, especially as it relates to electronics recycling, which is really popular in this area and sometimes difficult to find a spot. If the local neighbors could have access to your electronics recycling specifically, that might be a helpful, community builder.
Understood. And certainly I'll take that that feedback back to leadership.
Thank you.
Commissioner Simcox, you have your hand raised?
Yes. Mr. Daves, how many officers will be armed? Do you know?
Yes, approximately 20, and they will be as supervisors.
And they'll receive firearms training?
Absolutely. They'll be go through rigorous training. The university is working with a law enforcement consulting group, 21C consultants, to make sure that officers are prepared to handle the responsibility of having firearms, but also to understand that there are lots of mechanisms to de-escalate conflict, and that when you introduce firearms into that situation, officers have to be trained to make sure that they make the right decision at the right time.
I know there's been a lot of criticism of this program, but for what it's worth, I think it's a good idea, especially in the urban environment that we have where crime can happen anytime.
Yes, and, I think the university's board of trustees have paid attention to the national climate, the huge number of on-campus shootings, and the university feels that it needs to take the step to offer a maximum protection to its local community.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are you finished, Mr. Days?
I've done all my announcements. Like I said, I'll drop most of this information in the chat feature, including my email address, the date of the Mount Vernon quarterly meeting, and where you can go to submit feedback about the university's decision.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Up next.
Thank you.
Thank you. I see Courtney Peterson from American University. Did you have any quick announcements to make?
I do, if that's okay.
It is okay.
Perfect. Well, I'll try to be brief here. Just a couple of quick announcements. So AU's commencement is coming up Friday, May 12th and Saturday, May 13th. That's for our main campus. The law school will also have its commencement on Saturday, May 20th, all of which will be happening at Bender Arena. So there'll be some increased activity around campus. We will have our law enforcement, our police officers out there helping to direct some traffic, and we've encouraged folks to use public transportation. Of course, reminded our students and families of the AU Good Neighbor parking policy. On Jacobs Field sound barrier wall, we did receive our zoning order today. Hooray, we've been waiting for that. And we're going to submit our permit package by the end of the week so that we can get moving on that as quickly as possible. We do have a few summer projects that are going to happen on campus. If you are familiar with our Mary Graydon Center, where Einstein's and Paper Lantern is, that will become a Panera. In the tunnel, there's a vacant retail space by Subway. That's going to become a Qdoba. The bookstore is going to move from the pavilion to where the Eagle's Nest used to be. So there's going to be some switcheroo happening this summer. So if you do happen to bike or walk on campus, just know over by Mary Graydon Center, there'll be some activity there, and that's all part of our student thriving complex. As it relates to Meltzer and Scan, which I was here a couple of months ago, we have filed our FPA that was filed on April 10th. You can find the full package either on the Zoning Commission's website or on Meltzer Scan website, and I'll drop that link in the chat here in just a second. And I'll be back next month to do a formal presentation and request a resolution from the ANC regarding that project. And then lastly, I would mention that President Burwell, she's moved into her new residence. And so she is a member of ANC3D, and she's excited to be moved in and ready to go. And hopefully we'll be able to have some of the community over there to see the new residence. It's lovely. And we'll be back in time with a future date for that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We are going to move on to other institutions, and I know there is some people here from Sibley Hospital for a brief update. Is Raina Jordan here, and is there anyone else
I'm here.
Okay, great. There you are. Hello, greetings.
Greetings, how are you?
Good.
All right, I will go. And I'm also joined by my colleague Caroline Schaffa as well. She is on, so I will go ahead and proceed in the interest of time. Thank you all and good evening. My name is Raina Jordan and I am the Director of Government Affairs for Sibley Memorial Hospital. I'm here tonight to share that Sibley is seeking to renovate its sterile processing department. As our local governing body, we want to inform our ANC of our intention to request approval from SHPTA, which is our State Health and Planning Development Agency, to complete this renovation, provide an overview of the renovation and its benefits to the community, answer any questions, and to formally request a letter of support for our application. The Sterile Processing Department, or the SPD, is a critical department within the hospital. Its function is simple, but of the utmost importance. It is to provide clean and sterile medical, surgical supplies and equipment for patient care. In the SPD, medical, surgical supplies and equipment are cleaned, prepared, processed, sterilized, stored, and issued for patient care. The work of this department supports all functions and service lines of the hospital, particularly surgery. Sibley surgical services have grown over the years, and as such, a larger footprint is required to allow for an enhanced workflow. The SPD allows Sibley to provide high-quality surgical services to the community, and its role is vital in ensuring patient safety and preventing infections. Sibley will build the replacement SPD adjacent to the operating room suite. The existing SPD will remain operational while the build out of the new SPD takes place. We anticipate the build out taking about 2 years, so that would bring us to about summer of 2025 before the new SPD is online. SHPTA approval is required for any hospital capital expenditure of $6 million or more. This renovation is going to be about $21 million. We are requesting a CON from SHPTA for the full capital expenditure of this renovation. I think I've read that pretty fast, but thank you very much.
Actually, that was very informative. You need ANC approval for this. Who would that be addressed to? The SHPTA board?
Yes, so that would be Terry Thompson, the director of SHPTA, and we can include it into our application. And I can send that information.
And I'm sure we'll be communicating with each other along with Commissioner Quentin Cologne, because Sibley is part of our SMD, but I think Commissioner Nowak had a question.
Yeah, Ms. Jordan, will this construction all be interior, or does this mean that you'll be building a new exterior building? And if so, can you tell us where geographically on your campus that would be?
It'll all be interior, and I will actually let my colleague Caroline opine. That she's our VP of operations, so she can give more details about actually how the construction will go.
Yeah, good evening. Thanks for including me. There's no exterior impact for this particular building project. We have put one air handler on the roof, but it's sort of hidden in the back of the building. And that's been there a while, but it will serve the new sterile processing department. Everything else is inside the building.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So I will be reaching out to you so that we can get something on the agenda for next month.
Thank you very much. I appreciate everyone's time this evening.
Thank you. Are there any other local institutions here that are not on the agenda? As we move through, please raise your hand so we can see you in the participation list. Otherwise, we are going to move forward. Is there anyone here who has community concerns that are not on the agenda? While we are waiting for anyone to raise their hand, we are going to commissioner updates. I'm going to go in order. If you do not have an update, you do not need to speak. Commissioner Elkins, you're first. No update. Commissioner Cologne Roosevelt.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Loud and clear.
One tiny update. We were supposed to have the Spring Valley Park cleanup last weekend, but it was rained out. We're having it this Saturday. So show up 9 a.m. We can do invasive species. We can do, litter removal, all that. We love the park. So please, I'll be there. Say hi.
Great. Commissioner Joseph.
So I'll give an update on our litigation.
Yes.
In connection with 5122 Cathedral Avenue.
Yes.
Okay, so to catch everybody up, there is a house being demolished and rebuilt at 5122 Cathedral Avenue. The ANC had a special meeting on March 14th on this topic, and many of us have been deeply involved with the city, with the Department of Buildings, with the Office of Zoning, and we've tried to be deeply involved with the architect and the developer to ensure that the plans meet code and are legal. We're not opposed to a house. We don't care what color it is. We want the plans to be legal in every respect and consistent with the zoning requirements. We also want the plans to be accurate, and we want the documents to show the current conditions accurately. We have had, as an ANC, substantial concerns about the plans being inaccurate, the word I'll use. And we've raised these with numerous folks within the city. We understand this, but we were unable to reach resolution because the developer and the architect would not meaningfully engage with us. And so, with the support of the Office of the Advisory Neighborhood Commission, we have funding to retain a lawyer. We did that, and as of Friday, we formally appealed the existing building permit that was being used in that project. The nature of the appeal is to ensure that the zoning is conforms, and we raised 7 or 8 very material issues. We are co-appellants with the neighbors, and we're waiting to see what happens. At the same time, the builder has, and we have not received copies of the updated plans as we've requested numerous times, but we understand the builder has revised the plans, and we're eager to see what those look like, and hopefully they resolve the issues. If there's something I missed, Commissioner Duncan, let me know.
No, that is true, but it is an ongoing issue, but I believe we're making headway. However, there's another wrinkle, so I'm going to turn it over to Commissioner Horn for his update, because the builder has retained a lawyer.
Yeah, the wrinkle is that the builder's lawyer made an FOIA request of us, quite a long list of questions, and they were due yesterday. So we compiled the answers and sent it. And I am sorry to the other commissioners, I intended to send you the cover letter yesterday and forgot. So I will send it first thing tomorrow if I don't get to it tonight, so that you'll be able to see the whole thing. But basically, we answered the questions.
So, Commissioner, for our neighbors who might be listening and not familiar with FOIA, can you tell them the acronym and what compliance means?
Yes, the Freedom Information Act requires public bodies to make public a wide range of information that would otherwise be considered internal. There are certain exceptions, and we did withhold some things based upon the statute's exceptions. But generally speaking, we gave them the information you wanted.
Thank you.
The other matter is that you all may remember the Black Coffee Project. That is the building that has Black Coffee, Cafe Vino, and Dodge Chrome. The owner is interested in building apartments above it while keeping those businesses going. And yesterday, the owner filed with the BZA for a special exception. And compared to what we last saw, there are 2 things that are different. One is that the plans now retain 6 parking spaces on the space that was the rooftop. And somehow that counts as 10 for purposes of their requirements under zoning. And somehow that 10 came down from 11, which is what they told us last time. But at any rate, they're suggesting that their new plan does not require a special exception for parking, which is a big deal. The other major difference is that the exterior looks a lot different. It's darker, it has balconies, I think it looks better, but that's for all of us to consider. They're still seeking special exceptions because they had no loading berth. What they'd like to do is load from V Street. They have no rear yard, which they haven't ever had. And they want to put the bicycle parking up on the first floor through the garage rather than down where it would normally go. And they sort of solved the problem of being next to the black salt dumpster by putting the driveway is between their main door and the black salt building. So they really did respond to a lot of the suggestions from the community, and we'll have them describe what they're doing.
All right, great. Commissioner Simkins?
Hi, I was in the hearing room at the House of Representatives when we had the hearing on DC crime, and we are in a crime crisis, despite the fact that Chairman Mendelson said we are not in a crime crisis. And I'm going to read over my crime data, which unfortunately Officer McElwee didn't recite because it involves citywide crime. Our oath of office is to the city as a whole, and since we're responsible to the city as a whole, if someone in Ward 8 or Ward 7 is hurting, so are we. We have had 240 carjacking offenses this year. 74% of them involve guns. That's 1.97 per day. And that is not relatively rare, as one of my colleagues said a couple months ago. We've had 72 murders, 54% change in sex abuse cases. We've had 450 assaults with a dangerous weapon, 888 robberies, and violent crime is up 9%. We've had, I'm not joking about this, 2,248 motor vehicle thefts, which is up 107% from last year, and all crime is up 26%. And that's why I'm doing my resolution today. I'm doing a resolution on fraudulent tags, and we'll get to that later.
Thank you. I skipped you, Commissioner Noah. Do you have no updates? Okay, we have one going back to neighbor concerns. I would like to call on Mr. Scepter.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
We can see you too. Welcome.
Okay, so I have a comment kind of that leverages what we just heard. I have a concern, and rather than just throwing out, I have a suggested mitigation strategy. I believe that a core function of government is keeping people safe. And despite what Lieutenant Pongrat said, today I feel less safe. And I believe that having less crime than Georgetown is really not a measure for how safe we are in Spring Valley or this neighborhood. I've lived in DC for 33 years, and I feel less secure in my neighborhood than I ever have. I feel less safe than I have in the past 33 years. And apart from reports of crime within sight of my house, and there was a break-in a block from me, my wife can't even walk in the Spring Valley neighborhood without being harassed on the street or having risk of that. I'm not criticizing the police. I think they have a terribly hard job, and I respect their efforts each and every day. Nevertheless, I'm asking for something more. For the solution, I think we need to look to the past. I've been here long enough that I remember Jim Nathanson when he was Ward 3 council member, and he advocated preventive visibility. That is, when police patrol the neighborhoods, they are visible to everybody, and they provide just by their presence a deterrence to crime. I believe in that approach, and I would like to see regular and routine police patrols in my neighborhood and in Ward 3. Frankly, if MPD can have a car semi-permanently stationed at the corner of Macomb and MacArthur, they should be able to find the resources for patrols in our neighborhoods. One patrol car following in a regular pattern on a consistent basis will be very beneficial. I'm retired. I spend time in the neighborhood. I'm a cyclist. I never see routine patrols in this area. And I think that if a crime happens, we see tons of police cars automatically show up. And I think that's great. They respond very quickly. but I'd like to see cars patrolling the neighborhoods. I'd like to see a presence in our neighborhood as a deterrence to help us feel all safer.
Mr. Scepter, thank you for those comments. I'm going to call you in just a second, Commissioner Simquist. I do notice, because I live over on the other side of Locksboro from Spring Valley, that we have a lot more patrols through our neighborhoods. I will make a request to Lieutenant Pongratz and Officer McElwee that some of these patrols also make it over to Spring Valley.
Thank you. I mean, particularly since, you know, we've had these problems at the CVS. I mean,
I totally understand, and I hate to cut you off, but we need to move on. We have a packed agenda.
Sure.
But thank you so much. Commissioner Simquist, you have the
Yeah,
floor.
I'd like to respond to Mr. Scepter. The police are not the problem, and it's the DC Council which defunded the police. We're 700 officers short. Response times are increasing, and crime is increasing. So, you know, I encourage you to call Councilmember Fruman and frankly, write every other council person, because we're in a crime crisis here, and it's their fault. It's not Mayor Bowser's fault. It's not the police chief's fault. It's the council's fault. They're destroying our city. Thank you.
Moving on, we are moving to the official actions. First item up is the fraudulent use of license plate. Commissioner Simquist, you have the floor. Do you have a motion? Oh, I think you're muted.
Yes, I have a motion that I'm ready to present, and that is to make the fraudulent use of license plates, whether temporary or permanent, a felony punishable by over a year in jail. Right now, it's a misdemeanor. The use of our fraudulent plates places every single one of us in danger. If there is a
Commissioner Simquist, we're going to let you do it. I'm going to ask for a second. Is there a second?
Nope.
I think you're going to get a second, please. Commissioner Simquist.
I didn't get a second last time, so if I don't get a second, I want to get a chance to state the brief description of my resolution.
You did a brief description. The motion on the floor.
That is not a brief description.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, it is second. Commissioner Simquist, you have the floor.
Thank you. I wish I had that respect last month on my last resolution, but in any event, if we have people running around with fake and fraudulent paper plates, they can commit crimes and we have no way to do anything about it. They get away, frankly, they could get away with murder. It also deprives us from getting money from red light camera tickets, from parking tickets. This isn't a case where somebody like me may have a tag expire. That's not fraud. That's accidental. Or if you have two cars, you put the tag on the wrong car. That's not fraudulent. That's an accident. This is where somebody intentionally puts a false or fraudulent tag on their car, and somebody then has the intention of violating our laws, and somebody does get away with these breakages of our law. So that's the point of my resolution. In the common law of England, going toward today, in the common law of the United States, fraud is typically a felony. Why this isn't, I know that other commissioners are going to say, well, Maryland and Virginia don't make it a felony. Well, why should we follow them? We should be a leader in this. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other commissioners?
Yeah, I'd like to propose an amendment. I will propose it to Commissioner Simkowitz, that we have some language changes. Brad, would you mind putting that up? And then Commissioner Simkowitz, you can decide if it will be a friendly amendment or not. I have, just to make the discussion a little bit easier, I have annotated the letter so that it be very clear what I am proposing be changed compared to the commissioner's original letter. So a couple of things. First of all, the letter is addressed to the full council. Because changes to the criminal code start with the Committee on the Judiciary and Public Safety, I propose that we start with Councilmember Pinto. I suggested streamlining the first paragraph to just succinctly state what we're looking for. Second paragraph moves up. The paragraph itself is unchanged from Commissioner Simkowitz's letter, but moves it up further in the letter. Third paragraph is unchanged. The significant change would be in the penalties. It is my proposal that, like we have enhancements when a person is using or is in possession of a firearm, there are different penalties if it is possession only versus possession in the commission of another crime. I agree with Commissioner Simkowitz. I think it's problematic when crimes are committed using fraudulent plates. And so I would be supportive of upping this to a penalty if there, upping this to a felony if there are other felonies at play being charged. If there are not other felonies being charged, then I think that it's excessive, that our courts and our prisons are clogged up already, that we should sort of reduce that. It would be a significant jump from the 30 days and $1,000 of the current code to 6 months incarceration and up to $2,500 in fine. And then finally, that we consider this change as part of the overall criminal code work that's already in process. I think this actually increases the likelihood it would happen as opposed to decreasing it, because I know that the council is looking to get away from standalone requests.
I will second this amendment. Will you accept this as a friendly amendment, or would you like us to vote on it, Commissioner?
Well,
Simkowitz?
the reason I can't accept this as a friendly amendment is because this has an effect on us. If we get hit by a driver that has a false or fraudulent plate, there's not going to be any insurance to cover our injuries. And we've addressed this in prior terms of our ANC, and the use of a fraudulent plate will void the insurance. So there won't be any coverage for somebody that gets hurt while somebody's driving a car like this. So if you were putting a false tag on your car, you're doing it with the intent to defraud all of us. And that's why it should be a felony. It should always have been a felony. Why it's not, I have no idea, but we can change that here today by asking the council to do this. So aside from the keeping it under the felony limit, for just as a rank and file charge, forgetting the increases if there's another felony created, or that it's done in conjunction with another felony. If it's in conjunction with a felony, great. I mean, that should be an enhancement. But I think we have to use the felony language, and therefore we should keep with my language. I don't have a problem with addressing it to Miss Pinto, Council Member Pinto. So we can have this letter created going to her. I don't have a problem with that. It's just the felony part that I have a problem with.
I'm just thinking how, well, okay, so we're gonna vote on Commissioner Nowak's amendment as a whole. Does anyone have any comments on the amendment? While you all think, I'm gonna go ahead and comment. I actually like this as a compromise. I agree with these penalties under Commissioner Simkowitz's scenario. If someone is driving without insurance, that's also a crime. So I'm not sure this is gonna be any different than if it was a crime. I do think that just as it with the amendment, I feel like it is just more reasonable. Those are my thoughts. Commissioner Joseph.
May speak in opposition to the amendment from Commissioner Nowak. I don't support the amendment because I support what Commissioner Simkowitz says related to the fact that this should be a felony. I agree with what he says as a legal matter, that this is fraud and significant fraud and is the kind of fraud that is typically, although in the other jurisdictions, I agree with Commissioner Simkowitz in this instance. I will not be voting for Commissioner Simkowitz's letter either, because we clearly, I don't think, have the capacity to, one, meaningfully influence Brooke Pinto or anybody on this topic. And I think all of these letters and all these efforts, and the reason I don't vote for other or second other ones is not out of respect for Commissioner Simkowitz at all. It is out of the fact that we don't have the basis to legislate. And absent an enormous amount of follow-up, this is just going to go off into the wind and have no impact. Otherwise, we don't have the ability to know whether this should be a felony or should be a misdemeanor or why it is. And so I'm going to be voting no against both of them. And that is my basis for that.
Commissioner Horn?
I looked at the ANC resolution portal to see what other ANCs have been doing on crime issues. And for this entire year, no ANC has suggested that any penalty be increased. But there is an ANC resolution on this topic, which is ANC 1E resolved that it urges this Office of the City Administrator to reconvene the fake temporary tag task force and make public any recommendations that reduce the number of fake tags in the district. I don't think that we have the expertise on this. I don't think that we have the knowledge on this. And I don't know anything about this task force, but I'm inclined to vote no against both at this time. But if we were to bring it back up another time, this would be the kind of thing I'd be interested in is, what's actually happening on this issue and who should be dealing with it. And it seems like there is somebody, but I don't know anything about it. I just know what I read.
Thank you. Any other comments?
I'd like to address that. Our job is to advise government officials, including the council. And if other ANCs aren't doing their jobs, we have the right to step in. We're an independent commission. We can advise just like anybody else can. And in fact, we have very competent and capable and well-educated and well-spoken commissioners here in 3D, and we have for many terms. I think that our ANC is given a lot of weight because of our expertise. And I've been a defense lawyer, I've been a prosecutor, and I think I know as much, if not more than anybody on the council on crime issues. And I've also lived in DC in 5 different decades, maybe. I lost count. And I've seen how our lack of caring about crime has caused people to suffer unnecessarily. And Commissioner Horn was correct that we had no violent crimes in our PSA last year. And that's a great thing. I mean, everybody should aspire to that. But as I said before, our oath of office is to the city as a whole. And when people in my grandparents' neighborhoods or my mom's former neighborhood are suffering in other parts of the city, we suffer. We're one city. And I think that, this is the fraudulent use of tags is something that's very serious. And, passing a law like this would make people think twice to put a fake tag on their car. So that's why I think we should keep it a felony. And finally, the last point that I'd make is when you go to court, even if it's a felony, the court can drop it down to a misdemeanor. The court has the discretion to put something on the STET docket, which means that if the people comply with the terms of probation, that it won't be on their record. I mean, the court has a lot of discretion to avoid felony convictions and a lot of tools to take care of that. So just because something's charged as a felony doesn't mean that it will eventually not become a misdemeanor or nothing at all.
And if there are no other comments, I'm going to call the question. The motion on the floor is to amend the original letter as proposed by Commissioner Noah. We're gonna call the vote. We're gonna do a hand raise vote. All those in favor? The motion fails. So we are now considering Commissioner Simkowitz's full letter as written and submitted. Are there any other comments before I call the question?
Yeah, I'd like a roll call vote on the both the amendment and on this, on the main.
Okay, roll call for the amendment. Can you please call the roll, Brad?
This is a vote on the amendment proposed by Commissioner Nowak, 3D01,
Aye.
3D02,
Aye.
3D03,
No.
3D04, no. 3D05,
No.
3D06,
Aye.
3D07,
No.
The amendment fails. We are now voting on the original letter as written. Commissioner Cologne.
Okay, so a couple of things. First, I do think this is sort of out of our purview, like entirely. I think this is not the best way to be going about this, as Commissioner Joseph and Commissioner Horn stated. Second, I think we should be moving away from mandatory minimums, and I would like to offer an amendment to the letter to just take out the language saying that has to be a minimum of 1 year in prison carried to the sentence. I think it should be a felony. It is absolutely fraud. It's defrauding our government. It's defrauding our citizens. It's making it much harder for us to keep track of crime and to keep track of traffic violations and all of that. But I do think that setting a mandatory minimum can be really harsh in some cases where, you know, some teenager might have put a fraudulent tag on his car to race really fast down the highway at night or something like that. I think just mandatory minimums are not the best way to go about this. I think we should allow judges to do their job. And so if we could take that language out, I would vote for the letter.
I would accept that as a friendly amendment.
Friendly amendment, it is. Is there any other discussion?
And again, just to let everybody know, I mean, judges have discretion, and I think that they should have discretion. I think that the amendment is acceptable to me, and therefore I support the amendment.
Point of order. I understand that my amendment was voted down because I changed the penalties. But I think that Commissioner Simkowitz accepted the other aspects of my friendly amendment.
I did. That's correct.
So so we're all clear, the vote would, if we accept Commissioner Cologne's amendment, then the final vote would be for the original letter as amended by Nowak.
So I have an idea.
Last sentence.
We could have you amend with Commissioner Cologne, and then is that acceptable?
Yeah.
I think we all have this in our.
Felony with no minimum.
With no minimum.
Addressed to Councilmember Pinto.
Address the council member.
Yes, it's, Commissioner Nowak's letter is fine.
Yeah, okay. Great,
So we might want to vote again.
Okay, we're gonna call the question. We're gonna do a roll call vote once again. All those in favor, or Brad, please call the roll.
This is a vote on motion to approve the letter as amended, 3D01,
Aye.
3D02,
Aye.
3D03,
Aye.
3D04,
Present.
3D05,
No.
3D06,
Aye.
3D07,
Aye.
Motion passes. All right, next up is
People in the audience are laughing. I just have to.
the lab school. The lab school BZA application. Commissioner Nowak, is there a motion on the floor?
There is, so, yeah, come on up, Allison. My motion is to ask the BZA to limit the lab school's requested modification of consequence and certificate of occupancy, to limit it to a 3-year period to allow the community time to continue engaging with the lab school on relocation or co-location with the Foxhall Elementary School. Let's stop there.
I'll second that motion.
Okay. So the premise is we're all familiar with the Foxhall School, the lab school, and its use of the old Hardy building. What I think this body perhaps if we look backwards, it's always easy to Monday morning quarterback, but in the past, I think that perhaps the commission looked at binary choices. Lab school, yes, lab school, no, party school or Foxhall school, yes or no. And I think we need to be a little bit more expansive in our discussions and a little bit more creative. And so the purpose of this letter and this request to the BZA is just give us some time to do that. Because frankly, the request by Lab to extend the CO for 15 years back to 2038 puts us in a position that if DCPS studies and boundary studies and all of the other things that we're waiting to happen now, if we get to the place where they say a Foxhall school is necessary, then that's point A. And if the lab school is in that building through 2038 with all of the requisite approvals, Foxhole will have to be built on a site, you know, on the soccer field, on the basketball court, as Commissioner Simkowitz talked earlier. So my objective in doing this is saying, let us not accept that and let us look to be more creative. And so I'm asking the BZA to help us do that and to give us 3 years to see if we and Lab might come to an agreement that works for all parties.
Thank you. Before we open this up to commissioner discussions, the lab school is here and I would like to give them an opportunity to speak. So please introduce yourselves for the audience and you have the floor.
Sure, thank you, Commissioner Duncan, and thank you, Commissioner Noah. Allison Prince with Boosted Stories, and I represent Lab. I've represented Lab forever, since 1986. And I'm here tonight with Kim Wargo, who's the head of school. And I really appreciate you're doing an in-person format. It feels like the good old days. I'm happy to be here tonight. And I think everybody knows what's on the table. We are aware of the resolution. You absolutely can raise term length to the Board of Zoning Adjustment as you intend. We'd like the permanency, the certainty of the term that we requested. We would like the lease term to align with the zoning approval. But we acknowledge that you certainly can ask for a shorter term. We have no, that's not something we support, but it's certainly something we can raise. I don't know if you had anything you wanted to add, Kim.
No, I think you've stated our position, Allison. I'm happy to be here. I haven't met all of you. I've been head of school at Lab since July 1st, 2020, and happy to be in the neighborhood.
Thank you for coming. And as the commissioners speak, if there is a point of clarification that you'd like to address to the lab school, that will be allowed. Are there any commissioners that have would like to say something or have a question? Commissioner Joseph.
Thank you for being here. It's nice to see people in person. Can you speak to the capacity utilization of the lab school currently and your expectations going forward?
Sure. So our lease caps our enrollment at the Old Hardy School, or what we call Foxhall, at 90 students, and we currently have 78 students in the building.
Okay, and the 90 number is?
It's what is written in the lease.
That's the cap. And you have a sense of what the occupancy, the capacity of the school is?
Of the building?
Of the building, yeah. Thank you.
Well, I think that's a great question. I appreciate you asking it. It's a historical building, as you know, it's a beautiful building. But it wasn't built for an elementary school of today. It doesn't have a cafeteria, it doesn't have a gathering space. It doesn't have many of the things that an elementary school that would be utilized today, a public school size, would need and want and expect, frankly. It works very well for our population because we are so small. We use the rooms in very different ways than a typical elementary school because we do, working with students with language-based learning differences, we do very small group instruction. So our reading groups are anywhere from 1-to-1 to 3-to-1. And our classrooms, have
maybe 10 students in them at a time. So, you know, I don't know what an elementary school would, a public school would do with the building, but I know that when it was used as an elementary school in the public school system, it had 200 students in the building. I would find it challenging to imagine 200 students in the building with the expectations that parents logically and reasonably have today for how a school should function. Thank you. Do you have any other questions, Commissioner? Commissioner Simkowitz, you have the floor.
Thanks, Ms. Prince. I would be there in person, but I went to a super spreader event and I don't want to get anybody sick if I've got COVID. I don't have COVID, hopefully, but in any event, I want to protect my fellow commissioners, believe it or not. The question I have, it's more of a statement. I fought this lease, as I think many of you know, from going into effect. I worked with Commissioner Duncan before she was a commissioner in this Save Old Hardy. I did that on my personal capacity, not as a commissioner. I think that this school should have been a public school, but that ship sailed and I lost. You signed a lease with the city for 15 extra years, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that's a valid contract that the district cannot just turn its back on. Is that correct?
Correct.
And if the district government turned its back on this contract, what would happen as a lawyer? Bad things, right?
Nothing good.
Nothing good. So therefore, you know, I think that there's an expectation for the lab school that when they entered into this lease, that they get the occupancy for another 15 years. I might not have liked it, but it's the way it is. So I'm going to vote against this resolution because I think that they've earned the right by getting the city to agree to this lease that I didn't like in the first place, but it is what it is.
Thank you. Any other commissioners? All right, I think we're going to call the question. Oh, Commissioner Elkins.
I had a question of clarification in that regard, Commissioner. I thought that the lease, I was told that the lease does allow the city to use part of this building, and I don't remember the square footage, but it was a portion of the square footage. Now, if that is true, then I read this letter as suggesting that during the next 3 years, if in fact the BZA were to rule in favor, that this would allow for some in-depth discussions with the lab school about how the use of that space, together perhaps with a smaller new building from the public school system, could in fact function in a way that would not interfere with the lab school excessively and would allow a public school there. So I thought that was built into this letter. It wasn't simply a matter that the lab school had to move, although certainly that is an option for discussion, but would also be a case of how the entire community could be served by a sharing of the space. So I'm asking for a clarification from whoever knows here, whether that is the case.
I can clarify that. The lease, and I looked at it right before this meeting because I knew this would come up. The lease clearly provides that 12 to 20,000 square feet of the area can be sort of reclaimed by the district. The way I read the lease, I believe that's land area. I believe that's what was contemplated. I don't think it means sharing the actual building, but the district is fully protected with that right. There's no question.
Yeah, I agree with Ms. Prince. I think that it is land area. I think that, again, with the predicate that all of the things line up that say we need the Foxhall seats, that we would then be in a position to talk to lab about how we can coexist or co-locate in one option if they, or work with them, potentially with DCPS for financial incentives to relocate if there's another suitable space that they might find suitable. But again, I come back to the thing I'm looking for is creativity. You know, the co-location might help to address some things. that the head of school talked about, maybe the DCPS building has a cafeteria that could be shared or has some common space that the two schools could benefit, a gymnasium. There's any number of things that could be a benefit to both schools. And I just don't want us to close the door to those discussions.
I don't think we need to get into a debate, but I would note that the extension of the BZA order doesn't impinge on those extensions. We need the occupancy right, regardless, to align with the lease. It doesn't mean that if the district decides to reclaim the 20,000 feet, for example, there wouldn't be discussions about how to effectively operate together.
I agree. I don't disagree. I just think that the time sort of sets a line to say that we are in agreement that we are going to work together intensively and intentionally over 3 years.
So I would just offer to Ms. Friend's statement that we certainly plan to move forward with the request that the zoning match the lease. And, we heard discussion a little bit earlier about the budgetary process and the extension of that process into, I believe, 2029 was the term that I heard
For the build out,
from
yeah.
the chancellor.
Yeah.
So, I just offer that there might be some alignment in looking at that timeline for your letter. While I do want to emphasize that we plan to go forward with our request for the zoning and the lease match.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
I am, unless another commissioner would like to speak, I had told Mr. Bob Avery that he would have a chance to speak as the head of the FCCA, since they are an abutting, or this location is in the heart of their association. Mr. Avery, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you, Tricia. I have written a letter to the FCC, to the ANC, which you can all read, and we have also provided a letter of support to the BZA, which we have filed with. The FCCA strongly supports the renewal of the lease, renewal of the BZA order, and we believe that it should be for 15 years. I'm going to really cut to the chase. The real point here is that the BZA hearing is like a liquor license. The purpose of the zoning commission is only to weigh in on orders of zoning. And the real issue there, they need a zoning exception to run a school in an area that requires that, and they set conditions. And the only issue is whether or not lab meets those conditions. And if they do, they have the right to operate a school. That conveys with the building and has nothing to do with lab. It's that the building, if operated that way, lab inherited the BZA order of Rock Creek. That's what the BZA rules on. They have nothing to do with the lease. And in fact, if you get to change the lease, then anyone can petition the BZA to go back and change the BZA order anytime in the future if you believe that's required because the lease changes. It's not binding. But what you're doing here is you're setting in advance a condition that in 3 years it's up, whether the lease is changed or not. And I can't see any purpose of that. What you're really doing is forcing the BZA to have a premature hearing to commit to that when there's no reason right now to believe that will be needed. There's no evidence that you're going to be successful, or that if you are, that you can't come back to them. These two matters have nothing to do with each other. It's also my belief if you go to the BZA with this as your reasoning, they're going to reject it. Now let me flip the cards a little bit. As a neighborhood, I generally don't like long-term BZA orders. We like the ability to come back to the BZA with future issues that might arise, and we don't even know what they are. We are generally negotiating with lab, not with lab, not against lab rather than with lab. That relationship is, we're trying to advance the community issue, they're looking at their issues. So in general, a 15-year lease extension is not something I would, again, BZA order extension is not something I would like. I think what was proposed here, I would suggest a compromise that you align your BZA extension to the timetable that has been set by the city, just as Kim suggested, that goes with the new proposed potential for a Foxhall school, and that might require a change in the BZA order. Now you could say at this point, that's not an appropriate time. It's not going to happen in 3 years. The mayor signed this lease. You have to go to the mayor. That she's not going to change it in 3 years. She is simply not given no indication that within 3 years she's going to change her mind. I think what was suggested in aligning this letter with the 2009 period, 29 period makes a lot more sense. I think we at FCCA could support such a change. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. And it's just a question for clarification, Mr. Avery. The letter that you submitted, is that from the FCCA board or is that from you personally?
The attached letter, which is sent to the BZA, that is from the board. The board voted on that without objection. The letter I wrote to you was from me. That's just
Right. But the letter that you're submitting to the BZA. Okay, thank you very much.
And let me add one other thing, just as point of contact.
Okay, very quickly.
The school, when it was run as an elementary school, at one point had 230 students. When it was
Thank you for that
a
clarification.
city school. That's the most that have ever been in the building, is 230.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
So, thank you very much. Are there any commissioners who have any other comments? Commissioner Simplest?
I think that there, Janet Nash has her hand up.
So I think that I wasn't planning on opening this up to the public for discussion.
Well, I think our bylaws require it has to be opened it up for discussion.
Ms. Nash, you have the floor.
Yeah, hi. So I just want to jump in and say I appreciate what Bob said. I agree with him pretty much. I would say on behalf of the lab school that because the certificate of occupancy is an important aspect of your lease, if you will, to provide the school, that it does seem it's tantamount reducing it to 3 years, as if it's reducing your lease to 3 years and not to 15. So I would, if I were you, I would argue that the BZA does not have authority to change the term of your lease with the city. They do not. So as a, just my point of view is that it's a bad precedent to start having leases impacted that private industry gets, schools get, anybody gets, that the BZA would somehow have the authority or set the precedent to start shortening them by reducing the certificate of occupancy. That's all I mean.
Okay, our letter is about the addressing the certificate of occupancy. It is not about the lease, but I am going to make a friendly amendment to my letter, and we are going to add a sentence in here that says when the lease for the lab school was renewed, the original lease was set to expire in 2023, and an amendment was made to the lease to extend the lease. And there are a number, and that is going to be a sentence that I am adding to this letter.
That you proposed.
That I proposed. Oh, it's your letter. Shoot, I thought it was my letter. I am proposing that amendment. Is there a second?
Yeah, I'll second that. That's fine. I'll take it as a friendly.
Okay, thank you. But we are not discussing the actual lease. Commissioner Elkins.
I would like to say one more thing.
Ms. Nash, Commissioner Elkins has the floor. Thank you.
Madam Chairman, I wonder whether Commissioner Nowak would respond to Mr. Avery's suggestion. I found it somewhat attractive, and that is specifically to instead of saying 3 years, to say 2029. Whether you would support that or not, I just like your comment if you feel that you would like to make a comment.
Thank you. I would be willing to consider that if the FCCA were then to write in support of that.
Well, of course, Mr. Avery is not in a position to promise that. I think he's part of an institution.
Yeah, I'm not
we
kidding,
are.
Chuck.
But on the other hand, I think he was expressing that there was a likelihood or possibility that they might support that. And I think that would be very helpful to the BZA to know that the Civic Association agreed with us on this. And I think it would be less onerous on the lab school as well.
Chuck, I would be absolutely happy to take it back to the board. I would also take it to lab and say, is lab willing? If lab says, okay, 2029 is fine, I'm certain the FCCA would then go along. I think that is, I'll go anyways, but I suspect that if everybody seems to be in agreement, we could avoid a hearing at the BZA. We go with an action we're all agreed upon, everybody's better off. I think that serves the city and everyone involved.
And just to be clear, at 2029, if I could, Madam Chairman, just one more point. I mean, my understanding would be you get to 2029, the lab school is perfectly, well, probably 2028. The lab school is perfectly in a position. They would not be committing not to do this. So they would to go to the BZA and ask for a further extension. This is not like, well, that's it. It's not changing the lease.
I'm going to let Ms. Prince respond from the last.
Thank you, Chairman Duncan. We are not in agreement with the idea of 2029. We have requested the 15 years, and we want to stick to the 15 years. I appreciate the effort to compromise, though. I really do. One thing I think that the commission needs to understand is what schools have to plan way in advance. And 6 years sounds like a short time frame, but in the school world, it's not a short time frame. As you can see from River School trying to move to Nebraska Avenue, facing 3 years of appeals. But something else that I think is also important to note, because I think it's just in all fairness, and it's in the lease, so you can read it. If lab school doesn't have the right to occupy the building as an independent school, they've got to find someone else to occupy it, because they have the right to that building for 15 years. And if they can't get independent school approval for the building, the only other matter of right option is really a school that would be much less regulated, a charter school. And we don't want to do that. We know who the user is. We want to exercise our rights under the lease. But if we're in this scope of uncertainty where it's unclear whether we're going to have the BZA approval after 6 years, they've got to look at all options and their fiduciary responsibility to their board. And it's a nonprofit, and it puts us in sort of a limbo. I've worked on many schools, many schools, and schools very rarely have terms for this very reason, because they do need the certainty, but there have been some schools with terms. I've not seen a school with a term of less than 10 years. So, that's why we just really would like to move forward and get the lease to align with the approval. And we're trying to be very open about this, and I do appreciate the effort to compromise, and I appreciate the spirit of cooperation there. I wish I could just say, absolutely, that's fine.
I would also just like to make a statement that all of these arguments will also be made towards the BZA, and there is no guarantee that we are an advisory commission. We do not make the rules. We express our opinion as a commission as it's voted on. I'm going to cut off debate very soon, but Commissioner Simkowitz, please.
Georgetown University did a campus plan, and maybe Corey Peterson or Bob Avery knows how long. It was probably 18 years. Does anybody know? 20 years?
They're usually 25.
25 years. We worked very hard as a commission on that. I think Chuck Elkins was involved. So whether it was 18, 20, whatever, it's a long time.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone else have a comment, any commissioners on the letter as amended?
I'm going to make a proposal. I'm going to look to amend my own letter.
Okay.
I would like, again, in the sense of flexibility, to propose that we, as a commission, decide that we will go forward with 5 years or 2029, if we can do so in conjunction with FCCA. If the FCCA, for whatever valid reason they have, cannot join with us on that, then I would revert to the 3-year term as originally proposed.
What?
Friendly amendment.
Yeah, so
Okay.
if I may just restate that, so we're essentially, you're asking us to approve 2 versions of the letter. One version is 3 years, one version of 5 years.
Right.
If the FCCA comes back and says that they'll agree with 5 years, then we would send in the 5-year letter. And if they don't, then you would have the option to send in the 3-year letter.
That would be the proposal. Yeah. And actually, before we, can we put that up for discussion? I'm curious as to what the other commissioners think about that before we go right to a vote.
Does anyone have any questions on that?
Mr. Cologne?
Commissioner Cologne?
Can we do that? Just being totally honest, can we do that?
Yes, we can do that.
Yes.
Yes, I think we can.
We can do that. Commissioner Sinclair?
I did not join the Hardy Park thing that you did back in the Palisades as a commissioner. I joined as a public citizen, and I joined not as a commissioner because I don't think that we should be reverting to a private entity like the FCCA or the PCA. So, as much as I like the FCCA, I'm a resident. As a resident, I go to the meetings. I don't think we should be turning over anything to them.
I agree.
All right, we're gonna vote on, it's your amendment, so.
Is there a second?
Yeah, first I need a second. Or what?
I would second that.
Okay. All right, so it is this caveat letter. Commissioner Elkins, did you have one more thing to say?
Yes, I just wanted to say, I think that the amendment that's been proposed that would have 2 different letters is perfectly acceptable and makes a lot of sense. It's not deferring to a private entity, it's deferring to our neighbors and constituents and asking for guidance from them about where they stand on this matter. I think that's quite appropriate. So I happen to support this amendment that has just been made. Thank you.
All right. I'm gonna call the question. All those in favor of passing this letter as amended? Raise your hand, say aye.
I think we should do a roll call vote on this.
All right, call the roll, Brad, please.
This is a vote to approve the letter as amended, 3D01,
Yes.
3D02,
Yes.
3D03,
Yes.
3D04,
Yes.
3D05,
Yes.
3D06,
Yes.
3D07.
No.
Motion passes. Thank
Thank
you
you for
all
your time.
very much. Next up on the agenda is 4601 Green Place. Commissioner Nowak, do you have an amendment?
I do. It's actually 4607. Brad, if you wouldn't mind bringing up I have a brief PowerPoint presentation. I think the visuals will help. This is a request for a raised permit and special exception application at 4607 Green Place, which to help anybody geographically challenged as I was, is one of the streets below the Reservoir on the west side of MacArthur. And just go right to slide 2. Oh, sorry. So I'll stop there and you can second.
I second the motion. Okay. And then we're gonna pull up the presentation. Okay, there we go.
Next slide, please. Okay, so what you're seeing, next slide, is a picture of the existing home. The applicant would like to raise the existing sun porch, which you cannot see in this view, you'll see in just a minute. The special exception is required due to side yard and yard setbacks. No concerns or complaints have been raised by the neighbors or by the Office of Planning or DDOT. So in summary, I'm going to recommend approval, but I'll give you a little bit more detail as to why. Next slide, please, Brad. And this is a street map view. Right in the center is 4607 Green, and on the right-hand side, we have a view of the lot as exists today. No, this would be as built. Okay, next slide, please. This next slide shows us the back area. So this sun porch on the right is what the homeowner is looking to remove. And they would like to go up to a second-story addition with a new primary bedroom. You'll see, you can see it just in the very corner of the right-hand side where it's like a red, I don't know, canoe or something. It's quite a small side yard setback, as was common at the time the home was originally built. Next slide, please. So this is an architect's rendering of the new side. Note that none of this change is visible from the street. When completed, it's all behind the existing structure. And at the bottom, I have listed the proposed and existing setbacks versus the requirement. So the existing structure, you can see, is 6.3 feet from the side border. They're looking to go to 6 feet, so really de minimis. And then the rear, currently 20 feet back, they are looking to claim 2 additional feet, which I think are actually for the stairs. And then final view are some additional elevations as provided by the architect. So the first is if you're standing at the southern driveway, west facing, east facing elevation, you're looking at it heading east-west, and then from the north side. So again, I recommend approval. I don't see any issues here. And the other thing I should note is in the rear, that was where they were looking for the biggest relief, going from 20 feet to 18. The neighbor behind them, their house is 40 feet back. So there's no encroachment on the rear neighbor either.
I have a question. Have they talked to their neighbors? Have their neighbors weighed in?
That they, certified notice, but
Nobody's
nobody's raised any hands.
Commissioner Elkins. Oh, I think you're muted.
I didn't understand the answer there. That was my same question. Have the neighbors been consulted and have they given an affirmative answer?
I have not spoken to any neighbors, but I do know that this was the homeowners originally submitted this last fall. So it has been out there for 6 months at least.
But do we know whether the neighbors were notified? I mean, I think
they were notified. There is certification on the BZA page. They were notified.
okay.
Yes.
I mean, generally, in the past, we don't have to do things the same way we've done it in the past. But in the past, we have asked applicants to get affirmative responses from their neighbors, because it seems to me in most of these cases, and I think this would be such a case, the neighbors are the ones who probably are most affected. And if they are not concerned about it, then in most cases, this commission would not be concerned about it. But if by some chance they have not really focused on it, then we might be approving something that they really are not happy with. It sounds to me like in this case, they've had enough time, and I will not object, but I would hope that in the future we would take the initiative. This is something we have on our website as well, the suggesting that people consult with the neighbors and get some affirmative answer, because I personally find that of great guidance to me in terms of how I would vote.
I think that for those homeowners who are proactive and want to do that, but I would certainly encourage them to do that. I would caution against us going out beyond what the regulations and statutes require. I think what is required is notice to neighbors and certification of same. And so, if their neighbors don't respond, I don't want that homeowner to be held up because their neighbor, did not affirmatively consent.
Well, if I could just might respond, I certainly agree with you that they do not have a veto, but for those of us who are being consulted by you with regard to this, I find it a great guidance. And so I would, it's not a requirement, but it certainly is helpful to the rest of us as we decide, because we don't want to end up with neighbors being unhappy because they feel as if they were not, whatever the right word is, given enough.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I think that's a fair point, and I am gonna just raise a question that I know we don't crosstalk, but Commissioner Simkowitz, this was in your patch last year. I'm sure you would have raised your hand if any neighbors had reached out to you.
Yeah, nobody reached out to me, and I think that it's a good assumption. You snooze, you lose. And you know, I get that. I also get Commissioner Elkins' sort of idea that we should be going out and you know, affirmatively asking the adjoining neighbors, do you consent to this? And I think it's a good idea. But you know, in this case, you snooze, you lose rules. And you know, if they didn't complain for 6 months, you know, that's it in this particular case. But moving forward, I think we ought to do a little bit more, all of us, to see if any neighbor complains, not just that they didn't come in, because they may not live in the house, they may not get their mail, and they may live somewhere else, and that's a problem. Or there's renters living there that don't care. You know, the homeowner may care, but the renters might not. So
just to clarify, the policy in the past has not been that the commissioner reaches out to these neighbors, but that we ask that the applicant reach out to do so. And it's not mandatory, but it's helpful.
I believe that Commissioner Gates has her hand up.
Ms. Gates, you have the floor.
I think she's on mute.
Can you unmute Alma Gates, please?
I've asked her to unmute.
Alma, I'm very sorry, we cannot hear you, but unmute and see if you can. Does anyone else have any comments or questions?
I think Ms. Haas has it, and she seems to have.
Okay, now I'm unmuted.
Okay, yeah.
To follow up on what Chuck said, I think it's very important that the commissioner in whose district this property falls request that, or strongly suggest that letters of support be sent supporting or opposing these kinds of BZA requests. The other piece is, I want you to think about a 6-foot setback. It's very, very close. 8 feet is not generous. 6 feet is really very close. So you can't even put a tall ladder in between those properties. So I just, you know, I think requesting the letters is very important, and the BZA will not take hearsay, but the letter confirms the way the neighbor feels.
Thank you for your comments. I'm ready to call the question. All those in favor of supporting this letter, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Commissioner, motion passes 6-1. Commissioner Joseph opposing.
Commissioner Simkowitz.
Commissioner
No.
Simkowitz, you
Madam Chairman,
I-
I abstained. I abstained.
I didn't
Oh, you
oppose.
abstained. Okay, thank you.
I didn't
so you
oppose.
have
I
it
voted.
5-1-0.
Is he present or is he yes?
I was a yes.
Okay,
I voted
Commissioner
yes.
Simkowitz was a yes. Commissioner Elkins abstained.
Sorry,
Simkowitz was
Commissioner,
it.
there's a lag in the video.
Okay, you're yes or no?
I'm in there.
Okay, okay. Motion passes. Next item up on the agenda is 5113, share your plate. We have our last remaining people in the audience here for this topic. Commissioner Horn, is there a motion on the floor?
Yes, there was a letter, which, I moved, that, would approve the special exception for, an ADU at 513 Sherrier. If I can get a second, then I'll explain a little.
I second the motion.
We dealt with this at our February meeting. It's the same accessory dwelling unit, but we approved it based upon the grounds of the rear setback being lessened. And my understanding is that the Office of Zoning advised that that was the wrong legal grounds that they wanted to rule upon, and that instead they wished to rule upon an increase in the by right ADU from by right 440 square feet to 660, if I have that right. You could 450 to 650. 450 to 650. So that is this letter would approve the same ADU that we approved previously, but on different legal grounds.
I am going to, we do have some people who are here to speak for and against. But I'm first going to open it up to any of the commissioners. Do you have any questions from the last time about what this looks like, so we all know what we're talking about?
I remember from last time.
Yes, we remember from last time, this ADU is about 12.5 feet tall, and it's going to be below the window of the neighbors. If you are here to speak about this, could you please raise your hand so that we may call on you as part of the discussion? And in the meantime, I'm going to give Commissioner Elkins the floor.
I was concerned about the commitment by the applicant to plant trees to essentially shield this ADU from the neighbors. It sounded to me like that was a good compromise. And I didn't know whether that was just an oral agreement or whether that is written in as something that is enforceable and part of the application. And if it's not written in, I might consider making an amendment to this letter to make it a condition of our approval, because I think that the people who live behind are concerned about privacy, and I think the trees might help. And I would hope the applicant would be acceptable to that and would be willing to have that mandatory.
Can I ask for a clarification? Are you planning on putting some green? 100%. So green, it's included in the plans, so we shouldn't have any problems. Would you accept that as a friendly amendment?
Well, I want to make sure that you're able to speak. I mean, would that be all right?
To be honest, the Board of Zoning Adjustments, I'm just speaking factually, does not have any specific say as to whether or not, because the Department of Buildings also, in this case, not being a commercial property, does not have a specific regulation to say that we have to plant. It's not in the zoning, Board of Zoning Adjustments purview. Are we fully intending from the day we first talked about this project to plant trees? 100%. The porters do not want to look at a 5-story brick wall, just so everyone knows. I mean, it's 50 feet compared to the height of the structure, which is 11. I mean, it's pretty different. So the impact from their perspective on, in terms of whether or not, you know, there's a landscape barrier in place, it's much more impactful for them, I would say. But, you know, so I don't know. I mean, the ANC, sorry, the BZA and the Board of Zoning, sorry, just make sure I'm being clear. Office of Zoning, it's different. the Office of Zoning requested that we reach back and say, well, and I'm just gonna be just, DC maintains 3 copies of the zoning code. 2 of them will be certain. So we just had to switch from 5004.1 to 5003. Rather read the Office of Zoning person that's doing this just said, please check back in with the agency to make sure that they're good with their letter form, so that you guys can keep the letter. I mean, this is me saying this, you don't know anything about it, but I'm telling you what Mr. Reed told me. Each letter or they can choose to update it. So they're all good with the process. We've also already gone through the process with the Office of Planning's Development Review Board. They're all good with our proposed plan. Do we want to provide privacy? Yes. Do we want to deal with the stormwater issue, which is the main part of this? I mean, yes, it's unfortunate that the porters have to deal with it, I must say. But, you know, providing privacy and providing space for the barrier is part of it.
Okay.
That's the only other change you made to your sense, you guys wrote this, and we actually we've already increased the space between the back of the ADU and their property line.
Okay.
8 feet to 10 feet, just because we want to make sure that there's enough space for some nice trees to like actually grow.
Okay.
So.
All right. Thank you very much. Yeah. And could you state your name for the
My
record?
name is Omar Keith, and I'm a licensed architect.
Thank you very much. Commissioner
I
Noah.
have
Yeah.
a presentation prepared.
I want to speak on the idea of trees. I watched this as some friends went through this in Annapolis, where in order for them to get their project approved, they had to plant umpteen trees of very specific trunk and diameters. And while my friends didn't do this, what they learned through that process is it's very common for people to plant trees, not that you would do this, Mrs. Porter, but that they plant trees to get through the BZA and then they promptly die. So it has no long-term benefit other than to, in that case of Annapolis, they have to pay per tree for a permit. So it's a revenue generation thing. I don't think that we should be adding to the statutes or regulations as they exist. We should not be adding additional conditions. So I would just say that I would vote against a tree on this.
I would like to give the property owner, okay, Commissioner Elkins.
Well, at the right time, I'd like to make an amendment. Thank you.
Okay. I would like to hear from Mr. Marovich. I believe I pronounced that correctly.
Can I talk on trees one quick section? We really do want a green building. We really want greenery there.
Yeah.
The problem with the bamboo, which is what has been asked for, is that it is invasive and spreading to my other neighbors. And so we're just trying to not put back bamboo, which is what the request is. And then there was a request for evergreens. I don't know if evergreens are going to survive the water that comes off of their building, but I just want the freedom to be able to put trees in that will survive.
Yeah.
And having to negotiate now before we have landscape architects and all that, just seemed too much to kind of get in a contract with then somebody could sue me over whether we got the right trees or not. We definitely want to green screen that whole place. Just don't want to have to set the tree right now for purposes of just trying to get to the movement where we can hire the builder and go from there.
I will add just to that is that we've already hired an arborist to essentially, you know, district certified arborist to advise on tree planting and tree protection. The real issue on this is not actually the trees behind the ADU. The real issue are the two. There's a maple and a poplar that are massive, that are part of DC's. They're protected under DC's heritage trees. We have to do a lot of work in our network because it's regulated and because we love trees to save those trees. Those are contributing trees to the Palisades tree canopy. Those are the trees that are really critical to this project and affect the whole thing. The reason you can't build anything behind the forest house is because it's in the structural root zone of those trees. So I agree with Holly. We're trying to figure out what's going to survive with massive quantity of water, fire. one of the best civil engineers in the city to deal with all the water. We will get to the tree part of this. We've already hired an arborist to deal with the two big, the maple and the poplar. And we've moved the structure forward, and we're keeping it 10 feet lower than what we're allowed to do, so.
And you have the light issue potentially from the taller building
Yeah.
behind you, right? So that's gotta be taken into
Study,
account.
If you guys want to look at that, we can look at the shading study.
No, I'm just saying that that's another thing your arborist will have to take into account. is the-
I would like to give the chance for the neighbor behind, Mr. Marovich, a chance to speak. Can we, Mr. Marovich, can you unmute? Thank you. You have the
Thank you.
floor.
Thank you very much. I will try to be very brief, and I would just say what I would request from you is to ask the BZA to postpone the hearing. I think it is warranted. I will tell you why, and then I will tell you why I think it is important. I think it is warranted because the updated filing was made less than a week ago, which kind of changed the size of the ADU. But also, more importantly, we were provided with these on Sunday, which is 3 days ago. So we didn't have enough time to look at all the plans that were given us to understand them properly. On top of that, we met with the porters on Sunday. So this was me and as well my next door neighbor. So we had a meeting where we shared our concerns and proposed the solution in principle, not in detail, because we understand that there is an important element of how should I say, that it's their property and they have every right to how should I say, organize the construction in the way that works for them. But in principle, what we proposed was essentially a green plant barrier between the ADU and the water catchment area that is now, how shall I say, the only thing between the border of our two properties and the ADU. So we believe that, so far our proposal was not met amicably, but we hope it will be. And we think that, if the hearing, BZA hearing is postponed, it will give us enough time to talk more to our neighbors and to find a solution that will work for all of us. The issue of privacy is very important, and we think that we can help with our insight. And we also offered their architect to come into our apartment and to see how this looks from our window and how actually it can help to modify the design. So in a sense, we think that time would be used for that. But the reason for it is that it's warranted, we believe, because the submission was made less than a week ago, and we were only aware of it or were given these plans on Sunday. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. Do any of the commissioners have any questions?
I do have just a quick clarifying question. Can you super briefly tell me what changed from last month to this month?
So for me, the size of the
I'm going to the homeowner, just that you, because we approved it last month. Did anything
change February?
Okay.
Same site, exact same size, exact same height. We've changed nothing.
Okay.
The only difference is we went under the wrong variance request.
Got it. That's all I need.
Okay,
Thank you.
okay.
The
Yeah.
district of government, the District of Columbia, their offices, 3 offices involved.
I
just wanted to confirm that there was no change to the plans that we approved. Yeah. Yeah.
It's not.
Okay.
Okay.
That's it.
They also,
Okay.
the hearing, the notifications, the posting of the sign, the 200-foot radius,
Yeah.
everyone notified, that happened in the timely manner that the mayor requested.
Thank you very much. Before we vote, I just want to say that I am a big believer in property rights. And if you are following the zoning regulations and going for your variances and you are following the rules, I am inclined to allow people to do what they want. It's my understanding that this ADU could be twice as tall, and it is not. Every single person in our neighborhood who is next to a home that has been a new build that has happened in the last 3 years has had the view from their house changed, has likely gone from a sun garden to a shade garden. It just happens, and I will be voting to approve this letter based on the fact that we all have rights, and I think we will be opening ourselves to a dangerous situation if we took up the case where everybody had some changes to the look of their house. That's how I will be voting. Commissioner Elkins.
Well, I guess I have to disagree. I think the purpose of the BZA hearing is to try to deal with the light and air and disturbance of the other neighbor. That's exactly the reason we have these rules for they have to go before the BZA. And it seems quite appropriate to ask that a set of trees be installed between these two houses. And I'm not sure why the applicant would be opposed to that.
I don't think the applicant was.
And it's a perfectly appropriate
They're
thing
not.
for the A and C to ask the BZA to impose that as a condition. So I mean, it seems to me this is exactly what these BZA hearings are about. And it has nothing to do with whether people have property rights or not. It has to do with happy relationships between neighbors when they are going beyond the zoning code and asking for a special exception. They have to meet the requirement that they not impose a undue burden on their neighbors. I'm not using the exact language, but it's basically light and air, et cetera. So, and privacy.
Are you gonna?
So I would like to make an amendment. I guess if you, Madam Chairman, if you, having made a speech, I think maybe I should make a proposal for consideration by my colleagues, and that is that we amend the letter to say on the condition that the applicant would plant an appropriate barrier of trees and maintain them, or allow the neighbor to maintain them if they don't want to maintain them, so they don't die. I mean, I agree with Commissioner Nowork's point that trees do die, but they don't die necessarily if people take care of them. They sometimes do, but it helps to have
Do
somebody.
you accept that as a friendly amendment, or do we need a second?
We would need a second.
I asked for a second if there is one. Thank you. I think we got a second there. Did I or not?
I don't think that you have a
Commissioner
second.
Colon, did I get a
Commissioner
second
Elton.
from Commissioner Colon or not?
I seconded it.
Okay, Commissioner Cologne seconds it. Go ahead.
So. This is similar, I've been, and actually, it's been interesting to hear you guys talk about navigating these issues like this. If the orders have to plant trees, the BZA doesn't really, the Office of Zoning, the Department of Philippines, there's no mechanism within DC that says, okay, now these trees have to survive forever, unless they become heritage trees, which is what we're dealing with. So they would have to be 100 inches in circumference for this to essentially have any real teeth. What you guys are saying is totally honest.
I totally get what you're saying. Is there, it's, the gist of that was that this would be unenforceable. Are there any comments on this amendment? Commissioner Simquist, did you want to comment on the amendment?
Yeah, I've got a question from a factual point of view. My wife grew up in this house, so I have knowledge about this location. Can you see from the condo window in over top of the house? I think it's so high up. It'd have to be a high tree. Could the architect elaborate on that? The height of the condo?
I know it's late, can I show one image?
Do you have the slides?
Yeah.
Which slide do you do?
The sectional view that shows like the cut through the condo and the structure. So, go.
The condo advance, Brad can advance until we get to the one that you want.
That one. Wait, no, wait, sorry, go one before that. Okay, so there's the side of the ADU.
Yeah.
You can see the dashed line, that's what we're allowed to build by right. We're also by right allowed to build all the way to the rear property line. Not doing that. And there you can see the height approximately of the windows of the condo.
Yeah.
So the ADU is essentially in the kind of crawl space, right? The next floor up is the basement level, the next floor up is the ground floor of the apartment, and the next floor is second floor, next one is third. So the height of
Can you speak up?
the height of the principal structure is, you know, the main house is, you know, 20, sorry, I can't remember, maybe 600 feet. But that's further forward. So the condo can see over top their house. I'm guessing, I don't know how far to the top condos. The person on the lowest level can still see over the ADU. They're probably going to be looking at the back of the porter's house. But
The trees now.
but requiring someone else to maintain a piece of landscaping for another private property owner's view is also something that seems challenging.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Simquist, did you have something to say about the amendment?
No, I think I just had a question. Thank you. And then he answered my question.
The amendment did not pass, so.
Okay, so the amendment didn't pass, so we're back to the original letter.
No, have we voted on the amendment? We got it.
Oh, we did get a second. Okay.
Clinton
Are you
second.
ready to vote on the amendment?
Yeah.
Yes.
Can we stop the screen share so we can see everybody? All right, we are voting on the amendment to include landscaping in the letter. All those in favor? We have Commissioner Elkins. All those opposed? 6 to 1.
1 to 6.
So we are now back to discussing the original letter, and I'm ready to call the question. All right, so Brad, now we are voting to approve this letter. All those in favor? Passes unanimously. Thank you all very much. Thank you, Mr. Marovich, for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
Okay,
Madam Chairman, a point of order.
sure thing.
Maybe it's because of my hearing, but I have great difficulty hearing the audience. Is it possible for anyone who is speaking to either be given a microphone, if we don't have a microphone, to have them come to the podium, and maybe in the future we could have.
Yeah.
It is not just.
Yeah, so I will say this, no one is left in the audience.
You got
But it
No, no, no.
we had
Take us with you.
put our auxiliary microphone near the podium, and I forgot to move it out to the thing. So we do have an ancillary microphone hooked up, and we didn't move it for this last one because they were the only two in the audience. So, but that is something we need to keep in mind for the people at home. Okay, thank you. Commissioner Elkins, I'm hoping that you can introduce the resolution for the Wesley planned unit urban development. It says unit, but it's urban.
And unit development.
Oh, is it unit? Okay.
You're
Oh,
on mute there,
Commissioner
Mr.
Elkins, you are on mute.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. As I think most of the commissioners know, there is a proposal being worked on by Wesley Seminary, which would have a planned unit development that would build a dormitory that would house both Wesley students and American University students. They're in the midst of discussions with the neighborhood, and they are going well. And we hope that at some point it will come forward for a vote up or down or whatever by this commission. But in the meantime, the seminary is quite concerned for financial reasons that the zoning process on this PUD go forward quickly. They were delayed because they tried to do this under a campus plan. Now they need to do it under a PUD. And this has delayed them by a year. And they argue that if they're not able to build this dorm by 2026, they will be at risk of having to move from the campus elsewhere. And I think no one in the neighborhood is anxious to have them move. And for that reason, now that we see that there is a good process going on between the the seminary and the neighbors with regard to any remaining issues, we turn our attention to what is happening in the Office of Planning. And that is a case where they, of course, are required to review this application for a PUD and decide whether it meets the standards, and if so, to set it down, as they say, for a hearing, or recommend it be set down for a hearing by the zoning commission. And they are greatly overworked at this point, and they have informed Wesley that there may be a danger that it would be some time before they could deal with that. And what I am proposing, I think with the chairman's approval as well, is to move forward with a letter that does not take any position whatsoever about the merits of this PUD, but simply asks that the Office of Planning recognize the fact that they had already reviewed the campus plan, and therefore it might be easier for them to review just the PUD portion of it and move forward at a reasonable pace, while at the same time, of course, doing their due diligence and doing the job that they're required to do. So this letter is fairly neutral in that sense, but at the same time lends our weight to a process of moving forward. So I would recommend this and would ask for a second.
I will second that, or Commissioner Simkwitz seconds that. Discussion. I'm going to start off. I'm going to weigh in. For those of you who don't know, there is a community liaison committee, a CLC, that is in place because of a zoning order. And this was done in collaboration with them. And I think that I am encouraging everybody to approve this. We had a lot of input from the neighbors there. And does anyone have any questions? All right, motion on the floor is to approve this letter to send to the zoning administration. All those in favor? Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you all very much. Commissioner Elkins, you are up once again for the Man School Playground closed at 10 p.m. signs. Is there a motion?
Yeah, so I move that we adopt the letter that has been circulated and is on the website in just short set of words. We've had people showing up at 1 o'clock in the night and making a lot of noise, disturbing neighbors. And the school, the PTO, and myself and the neighbors are in favor of having some signs put up that says that this facility is closed at dark. This is what the Metropolitan Police have asked for us to have, so that their officers could act with authority to essentially move these celebrants at 1 o'clock, move on to some other site. That nothing will be done in terms of arresting them or anything, but the police have a little trouble.
Well, point of order, Commissioner Elkins. I think I'm going to ask for a second before I let you go on.
Okay, thank you.
Second, I'll second.
Okay, Commissioner Nowak seconds the motion. Please carry on.
I just have a few more sentences, which is the Metropolitan. I'm sorry, I'm not following the right procedure, Madam Chair.
It's okay.
That the Metropolitan Police have asked that there be an explicit sign, which then gives them the authority to go on the property and to enforce that requirement for closure. Thank you.
I'm going to open this up for questions or discussion. I think it's a fantastic idea and I'll be voting for it. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor to send this letter?
Fine.
Passes unanimously. Thank you. Moving on, 5122 Cathedral Avenue, Commissioner Joseph.
Thank you. I move to, that the commission adopt the letter as circulated previously, related to 5122 Cathedral to ask the Public Space Committee to postpone a vote or in the alternative to deny the application, the public space application submitted by the applicant from that house. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you.
Can I speak? May I say, this essentially is asking the Public Space Committee to wait for their new drawings. So we think that this is premature. We know an amended building permit is coming. And this is putting them on notice, and I'm going to be in strong support of this. Does anyone have any questions?
May I add, just for the
Yes.
record, I circulated a letter with both the developer, the architect, the developer's lawyer, and the neighbors, and received from the neighbors affirmation that the letter states the issues correctly, and no response from anybody on the developer side, with the exception of acknowledgement of the opposing attorneys.
Okay. Did you all catch that? All right, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor of sending this letter? Passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Next on the agenda is my letter to the Better Bus Initiative. Motion on the floor is to send a letter to the Better Bus Initiative asking that they wait until our next meeting and still accept our comments. Is there a second?
Second.
In a perfect world, I would have gathered all of the comments and put out a survey to the neighborhood already, but such is life, I have not. The Better Bus Initiative is very organized, but they have asked for public comment to close on June 5th. And this letter asks them to accept a resolution on June 8th, the day after our next meeting. I have reached out to them. I think that they will take this. There's also an ANC only Better Bus Initiative workshop that I plan on attending. And I'm really going to put it out there for neighbors to go. Does anyone have any questions?
I don't have a question, but a comment. This might be a great use for our Survey Monkey tool.
Yes, I plan on doing that. And part of that is, you know, when I want to go into it, the two-factor authentication, but we will take care of that. All those in favor? Opposed? All right, passes unanimously. Wonderful. We took the curb cut off. Raise and special exception for Green Place, that's done. Oh, okay, we went a little bit out of order. We have two letters for Trammell Crow extended hours. Commissioner Horn.
I'm moving that we adopt two letters that were that Lisa worked on that extend both the after hours work and the holiday work at the Balfour construction area. Second.
I'll second that.
Lisa gave us a statement, but basically the Palisades Community Association supports these two extension letters and asks the full support of ANC3D to sign and approve these two letters to DDOT on behalf of Trammell Crow. Basically, these were, this is how they've been working all along. And this is to extend them, the after hours for another 3 months and the holiday work for the rest of the year.
Can you please remind us the unextended work hours are 7 to 6, 7 to 7 to 9?
The extended is 7 to 7.
Okay. All right, that's sufficient. That's good. I just want to see how things go.
And this requires an amendment where it says in the first sentence that it would support an application made from April 2023 through the end of June 2023, should be May and July instead. So
We'll change that. That's a
friendly amendment. Okay. That's all I have.
Are there any questions? All right, all those in favor of sending these letters? Any opposed? Unanimous. I have to apologize, one more time. I've got so much writing on my agenda. I skipped over my 5017 Eskridge Terrace public space permit. And I would just like to pull up the letter to show for the record these drawings as an amendment. So this is a house that is at the corner of Eskridge Terrace and Dana Place, right at the bottom where University Terrace dumps into Eskridge Terrace. There are two houses there that are brand new, 5017 and 5019, which is also sometimes referred to as 5024 Dana Place because it's on the corner. They have, in the past, these houses are almost finished, submitted for a public space permit for a driveway. Commissioner Joseph and I walk through our neighborhood often, and during our walks, we noticed that a huge portion of their build is in the public space. And if we can scroll down to the second page. Attached, okay, right there. This is the drawing that they originally submitted for a public space permit for the driveway. And you can see how the houses look very far set back from the road. And as part of their building plans, they show that dimension from the street to the front of the house. That's 52 feet. If you scroll down a little bit more, Brad, you are going to see how close these houses have been built to the street. DDOT immediately went over there and told them that they're going to have to tear out those steps because that's right where a sidewalk will go. And they might have to reconfigure their whole front. And I will give credit to this owner and builder. They are engaging with ANC3D, and we are waiting for a new drawing from them that is actually based on real measurements. It has also come to our attention that part of the actual home structure is built in the public space. So there are significant problems with this home build. And this letter here is essentially alerting the Public Space Committee that we would ask them to scrutinize any application that has come before them, because they have applied several times for a public space permit. It's in the top system. It's where I got that drawing. And that we ask them not to make any decisions until ANC3D has had a chance to review these drawings to make sure that they are accurate. I'm going to be encouraging everyone to vote yes on this. Are there any questions?
I thought you were going to encourage us to go out with our tape measure.
I do go out with my tape measure. This is probably the most egregious home build, and it is becoming very obvious to me as I dig through the building plans that this house is built in the wrong place.
That's actually, may I ask a question? So do we think that there is somehow a disconnect between like where the house was actually sited, or did they build the house larger than the blueprints originally, or than the submitted plans?
The house looks to be the size that is drawn on the drawings.
And someone just put the first stake down in the wrong place.
I would like to think that it was as innocent as that.
On advice of counsel, we don't know.
Yeah.
We don't know, so I'm not going to state anything for the record, but we are investigating. And I'm not gonna let this go. Because this is egregious and this affects the entire community when we start building structures like this where we could have our sidewalks. As a reminder for the record, this is across the street from an elementary school where people park and kids and families walk in the street every day. So I think it's important.
Chairperson, for the record, is there a motion on the floor?
The motion on the floor is to approve my letter to the Public Space Committee. I'm not even following my own rules.
No, you did, seconded by Noah.
Okay, I will.
Okay. Commissioner Elkins.
I just want to make a larger point that I think others have made, but I think it's good to remind ourselves of this, that it's really not a good system that's operating now where individual commissioners walking through the neighborhood have to catch the violations, apparent violations of the zoning and public space rules, which should have been caught by the system. And I would hope that this commission going forward will undertake that as an issue. We do have a briefing coming up, I believe, tentatively scheduled for June, our June meeting from the Department of Buildings, and which I would hope we would address some of these systemic issues, because I don't think, I'm very happy that my colleagues found this case as well as the case on Cathedral Avenue. I think it's excellent, but I think that the Department of Buildings should have a system which catches it before we do. And apparently that broke down. And I think it's worth the time of this commission, if we can, to get further in toward the bottom of that issue about why it is that, what it is that failed in the system. Was it the inspections that failed or whatever? So anyway, I just want to put that for future discussion.
I agree wholeheartedly.
I agree as well. There are a handful of issues that we're tracking. Once we determine what the root cause of the case of the 5017 Eskridge Place, plus the issues that we were dealing with in the 5122 Cathedral, plus a few other houses. There's zoning questions and there's zoning and nonconformities that appear to be getting approved. There's building a public space that seems to be getting approved, and there's conversations between DDOT and DOB that aren't happening. And that's all what we have to sort of unpack all of that. And so Commissioner Elkins, I agree wholeheartedly. I think, and this will be something that takes up our year.
I think so too.
Yeah. I'm curious if any of this dysfunction ties back to the breakdown of DCRA into the different departments, and if that reorganization just hasn't gone as smoothly as planned.
I would say no, because this has been going on for quite some time. And one of the reasons why I wanted to do this job was because I see this all over the neighborhood. Years, it's been going on for years.
Yeah, what I would say is, as we've been dealing with the Department of Buildings, there's no one working there. From the director on down, there's no bodies in the building. The one person that the audience member mentioned was the same person that we're in touch with. Appears to be the only person warming a seat in the building. That person seems very confident and very good, but it's a starvation of resources, and the mayor's budget further cuts Department of Buildings. And I think that's all, it all benefits developers.
Do we think that whatever budget they have is being spent on commercial buildings and not residential construction?
Tis a mystery.
Good questions.
All right, in the interest of time, I'm calling the question. All those in favor to say this on this letter, unanimous. Thank you. All right, we are done with our official business and we are moving on to commission business. Commissioner Elkins, you would like to be reimbursed.
I see in front of several of you some nameplates, and even Commissioner Colin's nameplate, I think, has his entire name. I hope you give me credit for that. Thank you. Have to give it due deference. So I would like to be reimbursed for something like $36 and some odd cents for doing this wonderful favor, for the commission. And I,
Commissioner Elkins, did they keep ours, mine and yours?
yes,
so-
I'm happy to say that we did not have to reproduce yours or mine, and that's why your name is spelled correctly. That was a joke, JP.
Oh, I know. I,
Motion on the floor,
we
please.
haven't,
Good now.
we haven't had meetings for 3 years, so I didn't know. I thought they could have gotten thrown away.
They were in a box and they were saved.
Good.
All right, motion on the floor is to reimburse Commissioner Elkins the 36 some odd dollar or whatever the amount is for the napkins. All those in favor? Aye, okay, that project there at 5017 Eskridge. I would like to know where the property boundary is. And I am in the process of getting just a corner stake or a rear property stake from a certified surveyor. I do not have that proposal yet, but I'm assuming it's going to be around $400. In the absence of getting this from the builder, which he doesn't have to give us, and the properties adjacent are so old, they're not in the system. I wonder if it was worth it for the commission to, the motion on the floor is to spend that money to find out exactly how wrong this house is. Is there a second? Okay, Commissioner Elkins.
I would like to make an amendment that you be authorized to spend up to $600 without coming back to the commission for.
I'll take that as a friendly amendment.
Second. Oh, friendly doesn't have to be seconded.
Does anyone have any questions?
I'll just add, Commissioner Duncan is a wizard at looking at these plans, and it is not at all clear what's happening here, and this is an incredibly good use of our money to help streamline and solve what is going to be an enormous issue.
I do believe that if we find out where this property line is, where I think it is, there's going to be no way that the Department of Buildings, and I think this will be a catalyst example that is going to highlight in no uncertain terms to DOB and DDOT that there is a problem here, and we will be able to prove it.
This is a systemic problem.
Yes, it's a systemic problem. All right, all those in favor for the $600? It passes unanimously. ANC3D is going to single-handedly solve these problems, because the next item on the agenda is to ask more money for the attorneys. I believe we got $5,000 from OANC. We have now spent over $7,000. So we are in the hole. I do think that with the, we got that money specifically for 5122 Cathedral. And the neighbors there have also jumped onto the lawsuit. So that will help defray some costs, but our lawyer is extremely expensive. And now we've gone and appealed the building permit.
So how much are you asking for?
I don't know. I haven't made a motion yet. This is a commission business.
So can I speak?
Yes, please.
So largely, so did she come back and say she spent $7,000?
We got the hours yesterday.
But even though the retainer letter was capped at 5,000.
She knows that. So
Okay.
she probably would only charge us for $5,000
Yeah,
because but then she's gonna stop working.
yeah, so. I think we need to have a conversation with her before we go, and the neighbors to figure out the path forward. And I get that. I'm a registered lawyer in DC. I can handle whatever comes back in the appeal.
Commissioner Elkins?
Well, I'm concerned that, of course, we have 30 days between our meetings and we have just filed an appeal to the BZA. I have no idea what the timing is and how this may go, but I think it would be not very good if we end up not being able to defend the appeal that we've provided. Normally, but not, it's not mandatory, I guess. Normally, we would approve amounts of this size ahead of time, as opposed to $36 for name signs or whatever. It is possible to come back in and in June and say, well, we have now spent X dollars and we're asking for your approval. But I wonder whether we would want to authorize an amount that would carry us over until June, if in fact we need it, with the hope that maybe, I was hoping maybe the neighbors might pick up a bigger piece of this bill. So I
think that's
I just
right.
raised that issue, whether we shouldn't make a contingent approval here to get a sense from the commission whether how the commission feels about our pursuit of this effort.
Okay, I'm gonna make a bold motion. Motion on the floor is to authorize us to spend, not ask ONC, but spend the commission's reserve money, $10,000 in addition to what we have already spent. Is there a second?
I just I'll second.
Okay.
And then
yeah,
clarifying
yeah.
question. So we have 5,000 that we've received from OANC or committed,
Yeah,
7,000 spent. So we are 2,000 into commission money. And you want an additional 10. So that would make it a total of 12?
no, I was saying addition of 10 and we subtract the
Okay,
20,
all right, so,
the 2,000 from
okay.
the 10.
Okay, so in addition, so we're approving 10, but that takes into account the 2,000.
So
Okay,
I have a
thank you.
question for our treasurer.
Yeah.
Where would this money come from and how much do we have in that fund?
We have a reserve, in our checking account, our regular operating account, we have about $17,000. And we also have, I think off the top of my head, it's about 30 or 35 in our secondary account. We certainly have the money and we have a quarterly payment coming up as well from the city.
Commissioner Simkowitz?
Yeah, I'm not opposed to this. I just don't want to throw our money away. And I don't think we threw it away with the lawyer thus far. But you know, what is the path going forward on their bills? Is it going to be open-ended or is it going to be limited to the appeal?
Commissioner Joseph?
That's a very good question. I think the next step is a conversation with the lawyer and with the neighbors related to the joint defense, a reconciliation of the bill because the fees were already capped at $5,000. And with that, we will have a better path. My suspicion is that the actual bill to us isn't $7,000, but probably more like $4,000 because for various reasons. And then what I would say is we will be very judicious in when we use the attorney versus when Commissioner Duncan or I do something. And I'm more than willing to show up in court or before the appeal to ensure we defray as much cost as possible. And so, Commissioner Simkowitz, my answer to your question is, you know, using the attorney as little as possible, if at all, going forward, it would be my goal.
Thank you. That's perfect. That's perfect. Thank you.
Madam Chairman, I second that. We have at least 3 lawyers on this commission. And, you know, it's not that we are experts in zoning law, but before the BZA, I think perhaps a lot of that could be carried by commissioners and not by the lawyer. But I don't want to shortchange the effort because I want us to win, of course, in that BZA appeal. I don't know of any history during the 6 years I've been here that in fact we've done this before. So this is important. It's an important step that we've taken and I'd like us to win, but I would hope, as Commissioner Jacobs said, that we do as much as we can in-house.
Yes, we're voting on $10,000. All those in favor? All right. Any opposition? All right, that passes. Okay, we need to watch our time because of the,
I think the treasurer's report is the last item, right? So do that real quick.
and then we announce the next meeting. Can we just agree that we are going to post all of our all of our recordings of our meetings on YouTube so that people don't have to download the entire thing, because if it goes over 2 hours, Commissioner Elkins, I think that you don't have to because you're the owner of the Jock Box. So it lets you view, but everyone else, if you go past 2 hours, it makes you download. Commissioner,
Yes, just a clarifying question.
yes,
Unedited, complete
Yes.
recordings of just the video, of just.
Meeting start time to meeting end.
just the meeting,
Yeah, okay.
just the meeting. And we
Yes,
would do that.
Thank you
Commissioner
for,
Elkins?
I think we did a good job getting this answered today. We
Yeah.
don't need to break it apart because as, with the transcript has the times. And the transcript guy does a great job with the time. So forget my previous request for this morning. We don't need to break it up.
And we're not gonna open it up for comments. We're just gonna post it and we'll do a link.
So it's one video not broken up.
Correct.
So it would just be one video per month is posted.
Correct.
Well, as I mentioned in my email, we may at some point need to also put the transportation video in if we have.
Oh, right.
If we have 4 commissioners or more, which we usually do not, but if we do, and I notice that, I will start the recording machine.
And
Because
is there a limit to the hours, or do we have to break it up after 2?
no,
It's 12 hours per event.
you don't have to break it up on YouTube.
Yeah.
And it's the same
Okay.
video, just to be clear, and we all clear, it's the same video we normally post on our website. So it is edited in the sense that we cut out anything that's not the meeting itself, because I always, and I think Brad does too, start the recording ahead of time to make sure we don't make a mistake. But then we edit that out.
For the treasurer's report, we talked a little bit about the bank balances. Just one news of note, the QFR system, as we have used the past couple of months, and Commissioner Simkowitz and Elkins remember from past days, is now defunct. OANC has launched a new system. The check register is live. Other parts of it will be coming before the end of the quarter. And that's a net good because that system was bad.
Awesome. We also, motion on the floor is to approve the minutes from April.
That is
Is the treasurer, is there a written report also?
quarterly. We have to
Quarterly,
quarterly
okay.
approve, but
Thank
no, yeah.
Motion on the floor is to approve the minutes from April. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Commissioner, does anyone have, any comments? All those in favor of approving the minutes? All right, that passes unanimously. I also would like to announce that our next meeting is Wednesday, June
7th.
It's killing me.
7th, June 7th. At 7 p.m. It'll be hybrid in this very room. Commissioner Elkins.
Madam Chairman, I just wanted to say that today I attended a briefing by the Office of Attorney General about the regulation changing the zoning and BZA procedural hearings. This is case 22-25. You had authorized me in the past to testify on this. They postponed the hearing. I will testify on the 12th on behalf of the commission, but I think I will bring forward, if I can, on June 7th, my testimony so as to get it approved, because I think we will want to support a lot of the amendments that the Office of the Attorney General has proposed, which essentially give ANCs a lot more notice on zoning cases. So I will be sending that out ahead of time, and I would ask that you study it, because I would like to be able to walk into that hearing and say, this is the entire ANC.
Thank you. Excellent. Yeah, meeting is adjourned.
Motion adjourned.
Motion to adjourn. All those in favor? Adjourn. Thank you all very, very much.